Send it to you.
Okay, we're now live on Facebook. We are on 143. It is now 6:31.
Okay, I'll start up.
All right, I'll re-invite Jack just to make sure he has the link.
Okay, great. Okay, good evening, everybody. Today is Tuesday, February 9th, 2021. It is 6:30 p.m. and we are at our Cohasset Select Board meeting. Tonight's meeting is being conducted on the Zoom platform and live streamed on Cohasset 143 TV and Cohasset's Facebook page. The public is invited to participate on the Zoom platform, which can be accessed using the link provided at the top of the posted agenda for tonight's meeting. Please note comments made on Facebook are not being monitored. The Zoom app, it can be loaded onto smartphone, laptop, tablet, or computer. I think everybody knows that by now. Members of the board and other scheduled participants for tonight's meeting will be able to participate when called on by the chair. Board members will be able to ask questions of any participants. All votes taken at this meeting will be by roll call. Members of the public who wish to ask questions and are asked to utilize the question and answer feature on Zoom, including typing in their name and address for the public record. The chair will review the questions, and Carrie usually helps me with that, and direct them to the appropriate participant for a response. This meeting is also being recorded and will be available for later viewing on Cohasset 143 TV. Our first order of business is a roll call, beginning with Corey.
Corey Evans here.
Diane Kennedy here.
Paul Schubert here.
Harry Thompson here.
Okay, and we don't have a flag, but it is time to pledge allegiance. For those that are interested in joining us, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, tonight the first couple of agenda items to get us to 7 o'clock are public comment for items that are not on the agenda. So if there's anybody in the Zoom audience who is interested in making a public comment, I ask that you just in the question and answer feature, fill out your name and address, and we will read that if there is anybody here. I did hear there might be a petition relating to speed limits. So I left a little more time than I usually do for that. But if it doesn't show up here, we will be discussing speed limits either next week or the 23rd and making some decisions on a uniform speed limit.
I can keep monitoring, but I don't see anything yet.
Okay. And then just to waste a little bit of time, we do have 2 upcoming meetings next week, the 16th, and another meeting on the 23rd. So we're very busy. This is the time of year where things the hits just keep on coming, and we get working on our warrant for annual town meetings. So things are going to get busy and faster. And as you can see from tonight's agenda, it's pretty full. And I'm really going to ask all of your help in getting us to decision points so we can keep moving things along. And Corey, I do think I have CCTV queued up for next week, but we can talk about that.
Great, thank you.
And then Chris, anything stalling, or do you want to wait a few minutes for the community update?
Chief Sylvia's here.
Okay.
And I know that Chief Quigley is here.
Okay.
So I think it's a fairly quick update on where we are with the vaccine clinic.
Okay. All right. And that might give us some opportunity to talk about that after they speak. So Chief, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Pam was going to take the lead on this tonight, but you know me, I never seen a camera or a microphone I didn't like. So what I can tell you is I want to be upbeat about this, and it very simply that last week we ran 2 very successful clinics, one at 60 Elm Street for everybody 75 years of age and older. It was run by the Cohasset Fire Department paramedics, with Captain Randy Ballinger being the lead, with Captain Rob Ford, and firefighter Frank Wheelwright. Went off without a hitch. I saw the guys come down the hill with lollipops in their hands that had been given to them by one of the residents. So I guess I thought when you went to the doctor's office, you usually, if you got the shot, you got the lollipop. In this case, they gave the shot and got a lollipop. So they must have done a pretty good job. And then Friday, we had a little technical issue with our Thursday clinic on how the invitation was released. And the folks at Elder Affairs did yeoman's work to fix that. And we had a really successful clinic on Friday. And it was some of our phase 1 workers, as well as a whole bunch of our senior members of our community. So it really went off well. We were very excited about it, and we took a few lessons learned from it and restructured the room and the way we were going to do things to even make things better for this week. So the good news is, so we got into this week, and today was day 1 of the second shot for all of our first responders, and tomorrow we will finish that up. So all our first responders in town will have had 2 vaccinations. And then Thursday, we have another clinic planned for 100 people. And for the vast majority of those folks, it will be our senior members of our community, the 75-year-olds. So we do have some phase 1 folks that we need to finish up with. But all in all, as far as distributing vaccine, 2 really good weeks. And we are ready to go. As long as we continue to get vaccine, we're good to go. It's really been a great partnership between Elder Affairs, Public Safety, Public Health, town administration. The folks that work at Town Hall have been taking time off from their own duties to go and help us out in the clinic. It's it's been a great partnership amongst everybody. I said, not the type of thing, you don't want a pandemic to become a team building event, but that's exactly what it's become. So that's kind of what I've got. And I think between Chief Quigley and I, we can answer any questions that you might have.
Chief, did you have any comments, Chief Quigley?
I saw Corey had his hand up, so I was
Okay.
gonna.
Sorry, Corey.
No, it was just, my apologies if you mentioned it, but you said next Thursday's 100 was the first round of 100 as well. Have we done 2 days of 100? Or is it 100 in total that we've done so far outside of first responders?
So it's they're allotting us 100 doses. So that I guess the take home message is every dose that's allotted to us from the state is out the door and in someone's arm within a couple days. So we're not holding anything back or anything. That is, we order as much as they'll give us, and we get it out the door within a couple days.
Okay, so about 100 residents so far. That's great.
No, actually 200.
200.
the-
Okay, that's what I was trying to.
When we get through this Thursday. So last week's supply was 100, and this
Okay.
week's supply is 100 plus what we had for the first responders.
Great.
So
Carrie?
What happens when we're done vaccinating the over 75 range and we still have some extra vaccines? Are we looking to see if that might be a possibility, or do you think we'll be in the next phase by then? I know I have a lot of residents who are in that 65 to 75 range, reaching out, waiting, hoping they'll be soon. I don't know if we have any updates on that though.
So that's pretty much all driven by the state. And the state right now, we're in phase 2, part 1, which is everybody that's 75 and older. Phase 2, part 2 is 65 and anyone with 2 comorbidities. So that is yet to be told. We've yet to be told when they're going to roll that phase out, but that'll be decided by the the vaccine task force at the state level and the Mass Department of Public Health. But we are ready to go. I mean, we've already done our pre-registration for that. So we know who those folks are. And, if we can get vaccine from the state, we'll be ready to go. As much as they want to give us, we'll be ready to go.
Yeah, we have capacity, just we don't have vaccine.
And how are you teeing up the appointments each week? Just in terms of getting, I'm sure a lot of people that pre-registered, and if you're walking through the pre-registration list, some of them may have gone to Gillette Stadium or gone somewhere else. So how does that process work? And is there anything we can do in terms of messaging to the people that are calling us?
So the good news is that the messaging that has been going out, that if if you're waiting in line for us, don't wait. See if you can find vaccine in another place. And when we started looking at this, the beginning of the week, what we were seeing was about, or actually the end of last week, it was 20 or 30% of the people had already found someplace else to go. Based on what Elder Affairs did the last 2 days, they're telling me it's probably closer to 50% of the people they contact that are on our list. And our list for the 75-year-olds is first come, first serve. So it was the people that were pre-registered first were the first ones in line. But we're finding almost 50%. I'm going to guess that to be the number because I went through this with Pam and Elder Affairs earlier today, and it's just seemed that a lot of people have found other ways to get vaccinated.
That's
And I
good.
think
So
the end of that, Madam Chairperson, is that we continue to tell people that same thing.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the amount of vaccine that's being distributed to the local boards of health is we're at the kind of the bottom end of the food chain, and the big facilities are first, and then they work their way down through and finally to the local boards of health, unfortunately. So we're prepared, but we're at their mercy.
any other questions? I have just a general question, Chris. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but do we know how the state is handling, or different communities are handling, teachers and other, kind of town employees that interact with? I mean, I know the teachers are a big grouping of people. And how is that going to work out? Is that locally or?
Well, this has been another part of the big conversation, I think, which Chief Sylvia's been right in the middle of, and I think he can comment probably more effectively than I right now.
So unfortunately, this is again being driven by the Mass Department of Public Health and the governor's task force in regards to the order of when people are going to be vaccinated. Teachers right now are not until phase 2, part 3. And really the only folks that might have something to do with the schools or anything that are eligible at the present time are people that fall into a phase 1 part whatever, and that's because they might be speech therapists or occupational therapists or so forth. They're considered medical personnel, but teachers themselves unfortunately are below the 65 and older and the people with the comorbidities. So it's phase 2 part 3.
Great. Any other questions? Yep, Jack? You're on mute.
Okay. And now can you hear me? Okay, thank you. My apologies for being late. I was looking at 7 o'clock. So one question, I have gotten feedback, 2 things, and it may have been covered. If so, I apologize. Number one, there was people who were showing up for vaccinations and they were told that there was confusion, and there's some concern in some of the communities that they would have liked to have seen the registration done a little bit clearer. And some people evidently said that people showed up who were not signed up and they got the last of the vaccines. I think that needs to be addressed. And the other thing is there are rumors around town that some of the town officials have gotten vaccines ahead of everybody else. So I think it's probably a pretty good idea that we really definitively state that didn't happen, and the town officials say they have not had a vaccine, or if they have gotten the vaccine, that they should explain that they have gotten it and why.
So I'll answer both of those questions. Again, I'm kind of on the point on this, and the first question was in regards to what happened with people that arrived and thought that they had an appointment. Well, what very simply happened was, and I'll call it an absence of malice, but the town released the link for the PrepMod to sign up for the actual vaccination to 80 people. And those folks didn't understand, and I guess we didn't do a good enough job of explaining, but they didn't understand that that link was for them and them only. They proceeded to share it with all their friends. And all of a sudden, out of the 80 people that we had released it to, we had 32 people that signed up for a clinic that, in essence, weren't invited to the clinic. So we ended up having to cancel that clinic, and that was last Thursday. And then, as I mentioned, and unfortunately, you weren't here, Selectman Creighton, when I said that, but I'll give them kudos again. The folks at Elder Affairs grabbed the bull by the horns, and they made personal phone calls to everybody that was invited to the clinic and helped them enter their information into the computer system, so that when we ran the clinic on Friday, it went off pretty much without a hitch. There was only one individual that came to the door that didn't understand that it wasn't a daily clinic. And I spoke personally with that individual and told him that I would get him some more information. So we tried to wrap that up. That's what happened with that. As far as the second piece about, are there town officials? Well, there are town employees that have received vaccine, and they were all deemed to be phase 1 employees. Now, the reason being, some of them were phase 1 first responders, and you have to think of first responders with
Not a problem. That's not a problem.
big base.
Nobody's.
Well, it's just what it is. It was DPW workers, because they were plow drivers, and Chief Quigley and I can't get anywhere without them. So that was part 1. Part 2 was some town hall employees that had to be vaccinated so that they could work the clinics themselves. What we didn't want with people in the clinic, inside the clinic, that hadn't been vaccinated. Again, we were planning for the long haul, that we were going to be doing these clinics for months. And then the third piece was CERT individuals, so community emergency response team members that were vaccinated. So that's as far as it's gone. It's been people that were at town hall that actually volunteered to work the clinics, the CERT folks, and some people that were deemed to be first responders. But I personally have been managing those lists. So if anybody has any questions in regards to that as far as detail, I'm very, very willing to answer any questions that they might have, and anybody can get a hold of me.
Yeah, and the reason I bring this up is that there are some rumors around, and I'm not ascribing to those rumors, but I think it's important that we stop those rumors before they get a life of their own. And that's the reason I brought it up, so we get this out in the open, so we don't, we're not awash in rumors that are really, quite honestly, about not very nice and should not be. So let's nip it in the bud.
Thanks for the clarification, Chief, on that. Corey, you had a question?
Yeah, just on that, I just tweeted out, I'll do my best to amplify the message that this is your link and your link only. If somebody does share their link, do they risk losing their spot? Could somebody else then sign up, or are you at the clinic actually kind of double checking that everything is who they're supposed to be?
So learning from the first mistake, we are, again, the folks at Elder Affairs are making personal phone calls to everybody that's on that list that is 75 and above. So we are doing the data entry for them. And Jenna McCarthy at REC is also working with Pam, and anyone that's deemed to be a phase 1 employee is either being entered by Jenna or Pam Fahey. So we pretty much took care of all of that by just going the personal route. And we're hoping, again, if we continue to get vaccine as we move forward, and maybe we can go back to not having to make personal phone calls, but this is how we're addressing it at the present time.
Paul?
So the state of New Jersey, when they set up the vaccination system, they put in people with actual vaccination appointments. What happened was they did not get nearly as many vaccination doses available. So they had to go and reschedule hundreds of thousands of people. So this is one of the reasons why there's a list that we potentially would have in town, like Chief Sylvia has, but not an actual appointment until the vaccine is available and earmarked for the individual person. Otherwise, it's going to be a nightmare to try to reschedule. That's all.
Right, thanks. I think it makes sense to do as much personal. We're lucky that we are a small town and that we have a a pretty robust organizational system behind it. So thank you, both chiefs and Chris and Pam and everybody for the organizational structure, because, you know, we can quickly make up for inadvertent mistakes in terms of outreach and personally, you know, get people on a calendar as opposed to just sending random links. It's so stressful for everybody. You know, everybody wants, well, most people want to get vaccinated, especially the over 75-year-olds, and it's very confusing. There's a lot of mixed messages, both from the state and we're trying to keep it narrow in town in terms of the messages we give them, so we can get them all taken care of as quickly as possible.
And I just
Jack?
mentioned again that, you know, if it wasn't for the phenomenal work of the folks at Elder Affairs and some others in town,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have pulled this off. So they really did great work.
Selectman Schubert is going to throw a huge party for everybody as soon as we get on the other side of this.
Big
To
road.
thank. Yep. Jack?
Yeah, I wanted to say the one thing that has been very clear is, aside from the other good work done by people in the town, the people at the senior center, as always, and they do everything they do, they did an excellent job, you know, kind of jumping into the breach and getting this taken care of. So thank you, senior center people.
Great. All right. Any other questions? Chris, comments? We have to stall just a little bit because our next agenda item is a committee appointment at 7 p.m. and I don't want to start early.
Trying to lasso a couple of errand people to join us. So yeah, you don't have the full slate of people for the 7 o'clock appointment yet either.
Right.
So you know, I will echo all of your thanks, because we've really been grinding through this, and the extra effort the folks at the Elder Affairs and library, by the library staff stepped up too. I mean, they were making a lot of phone calls, and our librarian today, Megan James, and she said it was really wonderful the responses she got as she was calling folks. I mean, they're really appreciative. Even the ones who've already booked another appointment, which the call through has really been helpful. Some people have actually jumped ahead and found another alternative. So that personal contact that our staff has made possible, it's been really great. It's been a great thing, and it's also been very positive because people have been able to, you know, staff are actually reaching out and getting some great feedback. And I think it's been a real testament to what we're able to do at the local level for these kinds of things when we put our mind to it. And so it really has been, I think, a great experience. And it's been a real shot in the arm to hear people, you know, positively engaging.
Literally, but Chris, you bring up an important point, is that just the outreach on even some of the mix-ups, you know, some of the scheduling issues or setting people up is a phone call to somebody that's looking for a phone call. So I think that's really nice. Corey had his hand up, and then Paul.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, you know, I know we've got some time here, but would it be appropriate for us to just swap the next thing so we can approve the economic development plan? I see Lauren Lind is here, and that's something which is pretty easy to get through, and we can, you know, at least save ourselves 6 minutes.
The small business regional grant, that discussion?
Yeah.
Yep, Paul, if you want to make your comment, and then we'll just take a motion on
I was just
moving up the
wondering
agenda item.
If someone is on the list for a vaccine here, but gets a vaccine elsewhere, is there a way for them to just go online and remove their name so that the queue moves up faster?
I see that Pam just jumped on the meeting, so I'm going to let Pam answer that question because she's kind of running that end of things.
Sure. So if people want to just send an email to me, pfahey@cohassetma.org, or we also have that vaccine info at cohassetma.org. Either way, that would be great. We'll remove them from the pre-registration list. And we are updating it like every single day, because we've had people calling the seniors and finding out if they're still interested, or do they get it elsewhere? So we're constantly updating it.
Great. Okay. We have 5 minutes. Corey, if you wanted to make a motion to move up the small business regional grant in the agenda.
Yep, I would like to make a motion, if the board likes it, to move the 710 small business regional grant up to 655.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please. Jack?
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, I.
Okay, great. So we are now talking about what's on the agenda as small business regional grant. So I think Lauren's going to walk us through what that is and what we need to do.
So I have it available to pop up on the screen, Lauren. I'm your AV guy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Lauren Lynn, Planning Director for the town. Just here to talk about getting your support for an application that is a grant program. It's a regional pilot project. So it does involve, you have to have more than one municipality. So we are looking to partner with Hull on this. It's through the state office of the Massachusetts Office of Business Development. And what it is seeking partnership proposals that can contribute to regional recovery from the economic impacts of COVID. So it's actually got quite of a sort of broad, encouraging people to be creative here. So we put our heads together, and I will admit this has been a very short timeline. It was just about a week ago that we first met to discuss, let's try to, let's put something together and see if we can go for this program. So what we're offering is I'm not sure how familiar you are, but the Economic Development Task Force had already started a local gift card program for the town of Cohasset that has been very successful so far. So what we're proposing to do is to expand that program, also expand it for Hull, for that neighborhood as well. And we would also partner to do sort of a local delivery that would allow sort of small business creation in our towns that could, sort of think about Uber Eats that, sometimes can be somewhat difficult, or maybe there's businesses who are not already affiliated with that program. So this is something to expand that. And then also with the small component to tailor toward the elderly population. I think we talked about it almost being a perfect trifecta of, if someone can get a gift card and then use it to place an order, whether it's a restaurant or they want something from the local shops downtown, and then they can have it delivered if they wish. So they don't even have to go out, but they're still able to stimulate the local economy. So that is in a nutshell what we're proposing to do, and it's due tomorrow. So if anyone has any feedback, I'd be happy to take that and incorporate it. So with that, I'll turn it over for questions.
Just in general, the applicant is the town of Cohasset and the town of Hull.
Correct.
And it's the few items, funding for the few items that you mentioned. And then, and how much money are we seeking?
We're seeking $100,000, and that is split between a marketing component that would help, have like a web presence, whether it's an app or a website, something that can have a registry for all of the businesses in town, so people can go and find out when their opening hours are, their address, that sort of thing. And as well, it would also help us with, starting up this sort of small delivery partnership, if you will.
Okay. And you're looking for us just for authorization to sign off on a letter of recommendation?
Yes, a component of the application is a letter of support from the municipalities involved, just stating that they're in support of this application and this, funding to move forward with this pilot program.
Okay, great. Questions, Corey?
I just want to jump in and say thank you to Lauren and all the staff people that worked on this. She's right. I mean, this came across over the transom through the Cohasset Chamber of Commerce, I think less than a week ago. And this is a great opportunity. The one thing about the gift card program, they're thinking, or the idea would be doing some sort of match. So if you bought a gift card, the gift card for free. And the most important thing to realize for the town, if we do this program, is that these gift cards need to be used. If they're not used, they don't go to the businesses. So if you do buy a Cohasset card, please spend it. The best way that you can support businesses is to give them your patronage. They don't need just money, they need customers. So please, if you do participate in these programs, use that gift card. And I'm really excited by it. I think it's a great opportunity, and we should chase it as aggressively as we can.
Great, thanks. Any other questions from the board? Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to authorize me as chair to sign off on a letter of support that I'll ask Chris to draft.
I'd like to move that we authorize the select board chair to sign off on the, how would we best describe this?
Letter of support for the
Small business
regional grant.
Letter of support for the small business regional grant.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, I.
Okay. Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
I'll be
much,
back to
Lauren.
talk
Good
about
luck.
Something else soon.
Thank you, Lauren.
Okay, we'll be waiting for
you,
you.
Lauren.
Before we jump into the committee appointments, we did start late. We did have one citizen question. It relates to the discussion we had regarding the vaccination. So Carrie, if you want to just
Yes,
put that into the record.
yeah, comment from Dan Leahy saying, when you receive your email appointment for your COVID shot, it includes a live link to cancel or reschedule. I received my first shot last Friday and it was a flawless process. I was in and out under 25 minutes. Kudos to all. Thank you.
Congratulations. Excellent. Good to hear. Love to hear the good news instead of the bad. Pam, your hand is up. Did you want to say something?
No, I meant to say thanks. Wrong symbol.
Is there a thanks symbol? What is that?
I don't know. I was quick
Gotta
on the
make the
draw.
heart symbol.
Well,
Yeah,
this way
that's
we
what-
get to say goodbye.
Yeah.
Thank you
right.
for everything.
Thanks.
Okay. Great. So actually right on time is our committee appointments. So as you all may remember, Sewer Commissioner John Beck resigned, I believe right before Christmas. And we have one applicant for the position, the Sewer Commission position through the election. John would have been up, would have been up. This position is up for re-election in June. So that candidate is Paul Kearse. To fill an unexpired elected term, it is a joint vote of the board or commission on which the person has left and the select board. So we have this sewer commission. Is Wayne joining us, Bill? Do you know?
I hope.
Well, we can get to know our candidate first. Anyway, so Paul Kearse, who probably you all know has served admirably at Elder Affairs and also on the Affordable Housing Steering Committee for many years, has put his name forward. And maybe we'll start, Paul, with just introducing yourself and letting us know of your interest, and we'll go from there.
Sure. I'm Paul Kearse, 39 Old Coach Road. And I did submit my application a few weeks ago for Sewer Commission. I'm familiar with a lot of the subject matter that they deal with. To give you a kind of a history, I did been in town for a long time. My family all grew up here with a family of 8, and my folks still live on South Main Street. I still have a few siblings in town, and I've been very active in the town. Okay, very good, thanks. Yeah, I've done a lot of work with the Elder Affairs. I got involved in Elder Affairs about 12 years ago. Was the chairman of Elder Affairs for a little over 10 years. Tanner Carlson is now the chairman of the board of Elder Affairs there. I did a lot of work while I was there. As most of you may know, we spent time trying to build a senior center. So we finally built a senior center, and then worked on getting everyone acclimated to a senior center, and then trying to help it grow and prosper. Since then, I was appointed to the board of the Affordable Housing Steering Committee, in which I'm the vice chair there. We are, I think, 5 years in existence now on that committee. And I've done a lot of work in that area for affordable housing, spent a lot of time looking at what's out there, what's available, helping facilitate aspects of areas that the town needed some strengths in, and helping move forward with getting the housing trust set up and understanding how to get that funded and moving that forward so that we could start to apply for grants and get things rolling for affordable housing in the town. I own a small business. I own a medical device company in Wilmington, Mass. We've been manufacturing for 30 years, a lot of medical products. And we specialize in a lot of different areas, from interventional cardiology to a lot of fluid management products for the OR. And we also do a lot of orthopedic products. And as of late, we're deeply involved in building a PCR COVID-19 testing machine that's basically the size of a Keurig coffee machine. And at some point, those will be dispersed everywhere that you would go in public so that you could be tested and have known results within 15 minutes before entering a facility. So we get involved in a lot of stuff at our company, and so I do have a good background in management, manufacturing, and alike. I'm very active in St. Anthony Parish here in Cohasset. We've recently merged our parish with the parish in Hull, so I've been active in working on the parish council of both parishes and trying to help that foster and grow as well.
That's great. And Paul, you reminded me that when we were looking at the site for the senior center at 91 Sawyer, there was a lot of sewer research, engagement, et cetera, which I have completely forgotten about because it's a well-oiled machine. It's happening. We built it. They came, and it's a great success story in Cohasset. So
yeah, there was a land swap deal. There was
Yep.
a sewer deal. There was a special district set up there. There was
Yep.
there was a lot that was done behind the scenes to help facilitate that, and a lot of that credit goes to Glenn Pratt for
He's here.
really helping us get that rolling. So
Great.
it worked out really well. Obviously, I think a lot of people know that, and it's a beautiful facility. You're on mute, Diane.
Yeah, sorry. Any questions from the select board? And then I'll turn over to our sewer commissioners. Corey?
Hey, Paul, thanks very much for stepping forward, and thanks for everything you've done for the town through years. I've heard about the work you've done through multiple people through the Affordable Housing Commissions, stuff like that. So thanks for everything. Is this a position outside of the short period that we're thinking of running for otherwise, or something that you consider doing a longer term than this, or is this you're hearing heeding the call of what the town needs for a fill-in?
No, it's not a short-term goal for me. I plan on running if appointed tonight for the 3-year term that's vacant. I have done some work in this area as far as the subject matter is concerned. There's a lot of things in town that people talk about when it comes to sewer, such as the regionalization situations, what our current capacity is, what it can handle. We've got 60 miles of pipe, we've got 10 pumping stations, and we don't have endless capacity that folks think we do. So I've worked well with Bill on issues in the industry that I'm in the medical device industry. I've worked well with Wayne on a number of things. In fact, I worked with trying to get a grant for a village project to have a culvert moved. And I worked very well with our state senator and our state rep, as well as our Congressman Lynch, and got them to help us and write letters all in support of those grants that we submitted for that. Unfortunately, we didn't qualify for the Housing Choice Grant, but we actually got the attention of a lot of folks in the state to where the town of Cohasset is a focus for housing. And with all housing, it needs development, and all development needs some aspect of fluid management, if you will, whether it's inbound or outbound. So fortunately or unfortunately, I've been deeply involved in those issues.
May I have a follow-up?
Yep, and then Jack, yep.
And just one more thing. I mean, one thing that's intricately connected is the fact that we as a town are kind of in an affordable housing crisis. So I'm a little bit mourning your loss on those committees, but at the same time, there is a very direct link to affordable housing and sewer, and how we keep our town protected from things we don't want. So I'm just excited that you bring that energy, and you're very aware of that kind of crisis that we're facing. So thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jack.
I just want to say thank you, Paul, for agreeing. This is really one of the very important boards, and you've done a lot of good things. I'm a big fan of yours. So thanks for going forward, and to the rest of the people in town, we're so fortunate that Cohasset has a lot of Paul Kearses in town. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? All right, Bill, Wayne,
Bill first? Or I'll be first, I don't care. I've known Paul for a long time, and I know that his work ethic is incredible, and his sort of diligence of putting things together are what we need in all of our departments. And I think that the sewer department is coming up now with, as he mentioned, regionalization, our capacity, our future agreement with Hull, if we can renew the IMA that we have there now, the politics of this, and I think he's going to be very helpful in both the short term and the long term. And I would support his nomination or his selection.
And I would agree with Wayne. Had some conversations with Paul. There's a lot of stuff that we have to do. Frankly, two people can't deal with it. We've got everything from Jerusalem Road Estates, I'll add, to all sorts of other issues that are potentially developments within the town, and whether or not the town wants to do it. So there's a lot of things that are using sewer as a fulcrum, and getting somebody at Paul's qualifications would be welcomed.
great. All right, Bill, I hate to say this, but procedurally, you should just call your sewer commission to order so that you can join in our vote in a minute.
I've already done that today. I can't, should I do it twice in one day?
Did you close your last meeting?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
All right, so I would like to call the sewer commission meeting in order at 7:10 p.m.
I second that.
No, well,
Just say here, I just say aye.
Oh, he didn't tell us who was on. Okay. Aye.
Exactly. Right. And Paul, did you have a hand up? Or were you trying to help
No,
me
that
out
was
of
just trying
that?
to say, yeah, exactly, to get them to open.
Thank you. All right. So they're open. So we're all in session. This is a joint vote. So if somebody would like to make a motion in a second, and then we will go through the select board first and then the sewer commission second. So Carrie, you had your hand up for the motion.
I move that we appoint Paul Kearse to the sewer commission for the term ending on June 2021, the unexpired term.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, we had a second. So select board, all those in favor with the roll call vote beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Ray Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Bill, you want to poll your members?
Aye.
Wayne Sawchuk, aye.
Okay, congratulations, Paul. You, once you get sworn in with the clerk, you are a member of the sewer commission. Thank you so much for stepping up, and I hope you're available next Tuesday night, because we'll be discussing the regional sewer, just the sewer decision-making matrix at our meeting next week.
And Paul, our next meeting is the 29th of February at 10 o'clock in the morning. So Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Great.
it. Thank you guys.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bill and Wayne, for your hard work too.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up is the audit review, which, because it's not a formal vote, we can start in on it. I think it'll, we have a half-hour scheduled, so Jim, hopefully you can do a lot of the talking, and then we can ask some questions. Obviously, I reviewed the management report, and I think we're in good shape again, but would love for you to kind of walk us through not only your process, but the state of Cohasset financially.
Okay, thank you, Diane. I'm Jim Powers. I'm a partner of Powers and Sullivan, and we are responsible for completing your annual audit as of June 30th, 2020. Draft reports have been submitted. It's been an interesting year, let's put it that way. It's difficult for everybody in doing their jobs. Auditing is most times and has been, on site with the client, getting information. A lot of challenges that we encountered this year for all of our clients. I would like to thank Chris and the school and all the staff for working with us to get through this so we could gather enough information to audit everything that needed to be done. One of the good things about that, as Diane said a little while ago, was that the management letter in the past is really thin. You run a good shop, things are reconciled on time. We don't have any significant issues when we go through the books and records. You close on time. Everything that you're supposed to do, at least from a financial standpoint, and from an accounting reconciliation, is being done timely. So that became a little bit easier to make sure that our audit was done, because our analytical piece that we go through when we start our planning process as part of the audit, we do a risk assessment. Where are the risks associated with the town of Cohasset and its operations, their internal controls over financial reporting, and things that could go wrong based on the history. And pleasantly surprised as we went through that and identified those risks and focused on that, everything that we tested and went through like we normally did. We didn't really do any shortcuts or anything like that. It was just a little laborious, especially for Don and his staff, to get us information as we went through. But everything worked out well, which is kind of leading into the three reports that are before you tonight. One is the management letter. Second one is the schedule of federal awards. And the third one is the comprehensive annual financial report that we audit. Not going to go into incredible detail with everything, but kind of give you an overview of what I think is important as we go through each one. I'd like to start first with the schedule of federal awards, the expenditure of federal awards. If you spend over $750,000 in any one fiscal year, the federal government requires a compliance audit with those. Last year, you didn't have one because you fell under the $750,000 limit. This year, you got above that, and that major reason for getting above that was the COVID expenses. You had spent money, obviously, in fiscal year 2020, about $280,000 as of last year, somewhere in that vicinity, that required that to be added to the other grants. You have some school grants, et cetera, as you go through. And in fiscal year 2021, I'm talking to Don, and there's going to be a lot more expenditures. That'll become probably what we consider a major program next year, depending on the level of expenditures. The federal government is still coming up with compliance requirements for the CARES grant and for FEMA. So not everything is set in place, especially for the Federal Emergency Management Awards. I know they're still changing the rules on what's allowable, what isn't allowable. And they put out a rule, even though you had some FEMA money spent in last year, they said, do not put this on the schedule of federal awards until, in effect, we finalize compliance requirements. And so about $75,000 of those funds will show up in your fiscal year 2021 schedule of federal awards. One of the things that we have been doing and discussing, especially with Dawn as he went through that, we try to do some pre-audits to make sure that if there's anything questionable as you went through, we'd give our opinion, saying that, yeah, that makes sense. That would fall under the CARES Act and should be reimbursable. And I don't see any issues relative to that. So we don't get in trouble after the fact. We try to stay focused on that, and we'll be doing that for the rest of this year and in planning in the spring for next year's audit.
Can I just quickly ask a question? It might be Dawn or Jim to answer, but just in terms of how much of the CARES Act money did we actually expend in FY20?
in 20, you spent about $217,000 of CARES fund.
Wow, okay.
And another $72,000 in FEMA funds that should be reimbursed once
Okay.
they finalize that.
That,
Everybody was about the same, Diane, that, that first couple of months, because realistically, they passed this at the beginning of April. It said any expenditure from March 1st through December 30th could be reimbursed. And people were just ramping up to find out what was allowable as you went
Right.
through. And then working with the state and the county, as everybody's kind of following the same leads of what's allowable, what isn't allowable. Everybody was kind of making up the rules as they went and trying to make an interpretation. Some people broad interpretations, other ones narrowed, but over time, they kind of blended together to get a reasonable expectation of what is allowable, what could be expended. And I think that the town's in pretty good shape. And correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but you've spent, what, over 800,000 so far now? Somewhere in there?
About 800,000 so far. That will be split between CARES or FEMA, depending upon what we get for confirmation of awards from FEMA, once they go through their entire process.
Yeah. And so, but to get back to just the schedule of federal awards, you haven't had that. Basically, you spent a little under $1 million in federal funds during fiscal year 2020, most of it being school, a couple 100,000 being CARES. And we do compliance auditing on that. No findings, a really clean report, no issues at all. So without going into any further detail, unless you had any questions on it, I'd probably move on. We're good?
yes, please do. Thank you.
Okay. Now the second is our management letter. And if you remember a few years ago when Chris came in to take over, the management letter was a lot thicker. And over the last several years, it's going down. And this year, we only have a repeat from last year that you've already started working on. But like a lot of things with coronavirus, things got kind of put on hold. And it's really some documentation of internal controls. I think you have very good internal controls, to tell you the truth, that I set it up. It's the effort to go through and document those, to put in writing all the policies and procedures and the points that go through, give you 5 different sections of what should be part of that, and just making that formalized. One of the problems we did have this year in auditing is normally we'd like to go do some site visits, meaning, Chris or Dawn would tell us, would you mind taking a look at this particular thing at this particular department?
Right.
And that's kind of been impossible for making sure that not only our employees are safe, but so are yours. And so we've been talking, especially I've been talking with Dawn about hopefully if we can in the spring or maybe the fall or over the summer, depending on obviously what goes on, that there's some things that we want to look at that we think are working okay. They're not material to the financial statements, but do a little bit more in site visits to take a look at smaller operations as we go through. And hopefully we can get that done. So I do apologize for not really focusing on that, but you did have a good system of internal controls before, very little. And this year, I think that although Chris probably doesn't want management letter points, we really didn't go to those to that next level to look at non-material departments in certain transactions. So that's, but that's just the times right now that we went through.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I think everybody made the intelligent decision not to push the issue, and I don't think anybody, none of our clients has argued about that. So the documentation of internal controls, I expect this year, that's the last piece that just needs to be formalized, and we'll be taking a look at that in the spring when we come out to audit 2021. Any questions overall on internal controls management? And like I said earlier, all the cash is being reconciled, the receivables are reconciled. We have no audit adjustments as we go through. All the things that's supposed to happen are happening. Testing procurement as we go through, testing transactions and payrolls and everything that we can do, and we do, and everything was in good shape. Any questions on that? If not, I can move forward to the financial statements.
Just a quick question, and again, I don't know if it's really in your purview, but just in terms of risk analysis with respect to like computer security and things like that in the financial system, is that something you pay attention to, or that, you know, we get graded on whether we have appropriate controls in place for cybersecurity?
Yeah, we had a point in there a few years ago on that, and it was addressed, and we found that you're doing a good job to make sure that, and that was one of those things, Diane, that I wanted to do again this year.
Yeah.
We kind of take a look at it. We had a management letter point on that. I think maybe 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember off top of my head. But that is really important, especially now when you take a look at what's happening. So many people, there's all that fraudulent unemployment that's going on.
Right.
Pretty much every city and town have been hit with that. One of my partners came in the other day. She got a notice and said, yeah, I guess I was unemployed for a bit this year.
It's very unnerving, you know, and
And she had to go, we had to go through all the things. We had to go through the payroll. We have to do all kinds of reporting, et cetera. But how they got her, whatever, but they applied for that. So no one's immune to that, but what you need to do is make sure you're on top of that. Cybersecurity is one of the biggest issues that's out there. Having periodic audits of that, hiring an outside firm independent of the audit. There's professionals out there that can do that, and there's actually grant funds available that you can do to do a periodic audit to make sure that everything is challenged, just like the way we do it with the financial statements. That's something that might be a pretty good idea.
I think it's particularly, I think it's particularly important now and probably for every community because so many people are working from home. So they're accessing, you know, town systems from their private Wi-Fi, if you will. So it's definitely something that, you know, I think the board, I'd love to talk to you and Chris about that at another time. Because it's scary. So Corey?
Yeah, I just want to repeat what you're saying, Diane. I think that's just, it couldn't be more important, and the risk goes up every year, and the risk of the town could be enormous. So, you know, I'm encouraged by this becoming a higher priority. I'd like to see more of it.
Thanks. Jim, you can move on.
Okay. All right. Now, the comprehensive annual financial report, it's about 130 pages, and we're probably not going to go through every page right now. I'm going to give you the highlights of what I think is important. A couple of things that I think is kind of important as you go through. Obviously, the most important thing from an audit standpoint is you have an unqualified, not modified audit opinion. And you receive that again from us, basically telling the readers that the financial statements, in our opinion, your financial statements fairly stated, and there's no significant errors in and the numbers are the disclosures as we go through that. One of the things for the comprehensive annual financial report, you submit that to the GFOA, and you receive the award again. Instead of just putting the basic financial statements in there, there's a transmittal letter, an introductory section with all kinds of information, management discussion and analysis, the financial statements, notes, required supplementary information, combining schedules that give you more detail on the funds, and then finally a statistical section in the back that gives you all kinds of trend information for the last 10 years. So anybody really interested in your financial condition can see how well you've done over the last 10 years in maintaining that, again, the AAA rating that you have. If you take a look at your actual financial statements themselves, we're not giving an opinion on how strong your financial statements are. We're giving an opinion on whether they're accurate, you know, and fairly stated. From a non-audit perspective, You do and manage your finances, I think, pretty well. Your general fund ended up with a fund balance of about $5 million, which is a little over 10% of your recurring revenues and expenses. In your combined stabilization funds, you have another $5.5 million in there. And so when you're being taken a look at from the outside, you've almost have 20%, a little bit over 20% in reserves. And that gives you a lot of financial flexibility. Your budget to actual statements are solid. You show a surplus on there. You budget your revenues conservatively. And one of the reasons that's really important, especially this year, not as much for Cohasset as it is for a lot of places, because when you take a look at your real estate revenues, the real estate personal property tax, your intergovernmental revenues, and your motor vehicle taxes, which are consistent and people do pay those particular bills, that represents about 95% of your general fund income. And the governor has promised to maintain that local aid this year. But some communities have a lot of revenues that are dependent on fees, recreation, building, all kinds of things. And if we took a look at a lot of other financial statements last year, they had big revenue deficits because the programs that they normally ran or even the construction fees as they went down, meals tax that people have, hotel, motel taxes, significant drops, and really affected the bottom line adversely in fiscal year 20. And we expect that to be a bit bigger hit in 21 because they'll have the whole year of what's happening to meals tax if you see that as a revenue source. Cohasset doesn't have a big amount in there. And so you maintained your fund balance and even added to that by having a $1.9 million surplus for the year, which was excellent from that standpoint. Budget turnbacks and revenue surpluses as you went through. And so your general fund, which is the most important fund, well maintained and didn't see any issues on that. Your water and sewer funds, the two enterprise funds, basically the bottom line on that, they're self-supporting. Revenues of, you have surpluses in there, your cash flows look good, and your revenues are sufficient to cover the cost associated with maintaining those particular funds. I think those are in pretty good shape. And then the two biggest things from the standpoint of long-term liabilities is your other post-employment benefits liability, the OPEB fund, which has about $3.9 million at the end of fiscal 20 in there. You had contributed about $500,000 in there. One of the important parts when you take a look at your OPEB liability is your liability itself is $72.4 million using a discount rate of 2.28%, which is low. It's a risk-free rate because right now, based on your contribution that you've been making, it's not sufficient enough to get up into, say, the 6 or 7% range. And I know the town has voted to increase funding over the next several years with the OPEB plan. And inside of the financials, and I'm not going to drag you through where it is, but with the discount rate of 2.28%, which is about as low as it can go because of the risk-free rate that's being used, that's required. If you increased your discount rate from 2.28 to 3.38, your liability would go from $72 million to $60 million. So just think if you had over time, this is a paper liability for a lot of from this, but if you increase your actual funding, and then the actuary can use that funding methodology to, in effect, use a higher discount rate, your $72 million liability can easily go down to a more manageable one, where it becomes affordable if you get into, what I see is people that are in like the 6 to 7% range, if they've got enough funding that's in there, makes a dramatic change in the total liability. And what those communities can afford from a real cash outlay becomes closer to manage because the liability has been reduced by so much. So kind of a simultaneous equation. The more you put in, the less your liability goes down because you put more money in. But the actuary can say, all right, now it looks like that fund will be sufficient to pay for all those future liabilities. Big number, but you're still AAA rated as you go through. And so the rating agencies, et cetera, still know what you're encountering, and you're doing better than most, okay, to tell you the God's honest truth. Not everybody, but you're probably in the top 10% of putting money aside dollar-wise, but you're not in the top 5% from some places that have really sent a lot of money over to that particular trust. And the other, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that we have made commitments to and adopted policies to address our OPEB liability. And I want to shout out to both Tim Davis, who's chair of our PEB committee, and Katie Dugan, who has been steadfast on this. They're in our peanut gallery because they have another agenda item later in the meeting. So I just want to shout out to them because they have kept us focused on this, and it's making a big difference. Jack had his hand up, and then Carrie.
Yeah, on the discount rate. Now, if we're at 2.8, going to 6, I'm not quite sure how we would go to 6. Is that by committing to a higher pay down of that balance, or you kind of lost me there?
Okay, sorry, Jack. So what happens is the actuary takes a look and says, and GASB puts out the rules that says, okay, if you went to a commercial entity, Jack, and said, okay, we're going to use a 7% discount rate on a defined benefit plan. Okay, see, I got a smile going from you. Right? Why do you think they all got dropped? Because the risk, the risk of earning that is pretty high. Are you really going to return, net of expenses 7% over time? That's doable, but it gets a little harder in practice. Okay, and so that's why for any plan and risk, you have to use a risk-free rate, because you cannot push the liability to the employee. The employer has to do that. When you take a look at a government, the town of Cohasset has been around for 250 years. I think they saw that on the letterhead. It's your anniversary. And it'll probably be here in 250 years. Okay, so the risk of payment is low, meaning that the employees, because it's a defined benefit plan, will get paid. You might have to make decisions on what you're going to allocate and how you're going to budget and cut back in other areas. But unless the law changes or unless you make plan changes, the risk of payment is low. Same thing for the pension plan. So GAAP allows you to use a discount rate, in effect, almost equal to what you expect your investment rate of return is. All right. But what your contribution is makes a huge difference on whether or not that OPEB fund that has $3.9 million in it right now has the ability to earn enough money at say a 6% rate to, in effect, with a guaranteed contribution every year from the town to make up for that that unfunded liability, that will in itself be sufficient to pay all the liabilities discounted back for when they're going to be put in the future. So the more you contribute, the actuary will look at it and say, okay, you're giving $1 million a year now. You used to give $500,000, and you're consistently doing that. And so the actuary can use what's called a blended rate, coming from the risk-free rate, which is the rate of return for a 20-year AA municipal bond.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And saying, all right, if everything was perfect, you had all that, you expect an investment rate, might be a rate of return for all the funds. You might have an investment rate of return of, 6-7%, but you can't use a discount rate of 6 or 7%. You're not putting the money into the trust that will earn that. And so then they do a blended rate that says, okay, there's enough money inside of the trust, and your payment will go on for the next 60 years for the OPEB trust. So if you have a 20-year-old new worker, and they're going to live to 85 years old, okay, you have in effect 45 years to fund what they earn, the benefits they earn, and then you get another 25 years before they're actuarially expected to pass away. And so that window's pretty long. And so that horizon is huge. And as long as you but what the actuary would do is look at it and says, okay, for the next 65 years, we have payments that are going to go out. We have enough in the fund right now to pay for the first 15 years of it. So we can use a higher discount rate. We can use a discount rate of 6.5% for the first 15 years, but then we have to drop down to 2.28% for the next, whatever I said, 45 years. And then they blend the rate, and all of a sudden you end up at 4.1, which changes your liability.
I'm just gonna jump in to move us along, only because we are gonna get a annual report from our PEB committee, our OPEB committee,
okay.
talking about rates and where we're at in our actuarial reports. I know Dawn was probably at a meeting last week with them, so we are gonna deep dive into this real soon.
Come on, Diane, I love this stuff.
I know. I'm a geek for it too, but I know that you're not going to be, if Jim goes down this path and then we hear it again next week or 2 weeks. So
yeah. I'm hoping I'm consistent to what they say too.
yeah. No, it's great. And it's actually really fascinating. And we've come a long way. So I'm really happy about that.
It's the big liability as you're out there. Your pension liability through Norfolk, they're about 65% funded, but you've got to put into the little context in there. They use a discount rate of 7.75%. Yeah. Okay, and that's the reason in the notes for the financial statements, GAAP requires that you put in a sensitivity analysis. So they use 7.75%. So if you want to adjust that in your head when you're analyzing your financial statements, you could say, what would it be if it was 6.75%? And if it was 6.75%, you could jump up to $25 million. Or if it was 8.75%, and that used to be where they were. They were 8.5% when they first started the Pension Reform Act back in 1988, as they went through that. And, but again, so the sensitivity analysis gives you in effect, the high and low of what would be there. And a lot of people, when the rating agencies look at this, they use and do adjustments for what they expect everybody is. So when they look at it, if somebody's using a 7.75, when they evaluate you, they kind of put everybody under the same measurement, focus and basis. But it's important to look at that discount rate, especially if you look at Parac's site when they go through and they list out everybody's funding percentage. They need to list the discount rate being used by each one of those particular entities to do a real apples to apples comparison as you go through. So although you're high, you're probably not as high as, in practicality, it's probably another 10 million, but it's still a heck of a lot better than the $70 million that you have as a liability for OPEB. But historically, at least you had a lot of funds set aside for that historically, and so you don't have to make up as much. Those are obviously the big two issues from a long-term perspective. You can't do as much on the pension side, but from what I'm hearing tonight and what I've talked to Chris and Don about is that you're actively addressing that OPEB liability, which is great from a financial perspective. And that's kind of the highlights in the financial statements themselves. If there's any questions, certainly we'll address them.
Yeah. Paul?
So going back to the risk, so Diane was talking about the risk for the town. From the point of view of COVID and what's been going on in the last year, we're going into a fiscal year that's going to be pretty much 100% COVID exposure. So are there anything that you see that's going to be a risk for the town from accounting point of view, looking at other municipalities that may have come across unusual risks or costs or fees or potential downside in the next coming year? Because that is going to kind of worry me. The short term. Long term, I think we're going to be okay. So, what do you see the short term risk?
The short term risk is if the government stops paying for a lot of this, let's say for testing, instead of getting a free test, all of a sudden that's going to be on your insurance carrier as you go through. And I would see that as being a good hit to a budget, that all of a sudden your health insurance costs may go up a lot for the carriers that you went through. One of the things I did see, Paul, up front, I have one client, a couple of clients that are self-insured for health insurance, and they normally contributed, it was $1.5 million per month to the health insurance trust. And so they put every quarter in $4.5 million, and all of the medical expenses were paid out of that particular trust. And then Blue Cross Blue Shield did a true up at the end of the quarter, and you either owed them, a few $100,000, or you had a few $100,000 left. And so you did a quarterly recap. Well, this community, as it went through, and that was April, May, and June, the start of the pandemic, as you went through, they put their $4.5 million in. They only spent $3.1 million for that quarter in expenses. No one was going to the doctors.
Right.
No people were getting operations. And it was eye-opening when I was looking at that back in July from a short-term perspective. I don't know if that is still the case, if people are not visiting their doctors, if people aren't getting that particular health care. We've gotten, on our health care, for our own firm, we've gotten reimbursements from them because, not as much had been expended because of the plan we had.
And that's
so,
happening with our plan as well, our Maya plan.
Yeah, and so I think the biggest short-term risk is the uncertainty, but from a long-term standpoint is what's it going to cost to, if this doesn't go away, what's it going to do for everybody's health? How much you have to put in for if somebody's out for 2 months because they have COVID, replacement costs, those type of things. And again, all businesses will have that same risk, but I still think it's too early to figure out, with the vaccination. I was listening to you earlier and it sounded great for what you're doing with the elderly and the rest of that stuff that really needed to happen. But are these vaccines really going to be as effective as we all hope they are? So I don't know if that answers your question, Paul, but that's kind of what I'm seeing and talking to the other clients about.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Jim or for Don? Again, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Don and Chris, for keeping us steady and allowing for us to have this in your team to get this kind of good report on our finances and our financial controls, et cetera. We'll just keep working because I'm risk adverse. And I know we're going to have a lot of challenges just in budgeting, let alone accounting. So we'll just keep the transparency going, and I really appreciate your time tonight, Jim.
No problem. Thank you. Good night,
Thanks,
all.
Jim.
All right. Take care.
All right, thanks.
Good night, everybody. Don, Chris, you good?
Good.
Good.
Good. Don's not leaving though.
I'm not leaving.
What,
I'm
we
hanging.
got you again. Oh yeah, for this one. So next up on the agenda is a report from the Elm Street Corridor working group. So we're going to promote Katie Dugan if she's not there. She is, and Lauren Lind is going to walk us through a funding request that we were we learned about a few weeks ago when we got an Elm Street Corridor report.
Thank you. Hello again, everyone. Lauren Lind, Planning Director. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint presentation to sort of bring you up to speed on the history and background and more detail on what our request is. I'll start off by saying that what we're asking of you to do tonight is to sort of approve the transfer or the allocation of approximately $35,000 so that we can use it. We have this fund in an account and we're hoping to reallocate to use for the purpose of the Elm Street Corridor Initiative. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And I'll start. I will note that some of these are going to be a little repetitive because you did hear at this presentation something similar from Jason Federico a few months ago, but for the benefit of everybody, I'm just going to quickly review. So this is the Elm Street corridor is it was identified as a priority initiative in the 2019 master plan, as well as the municipal harbor plan, and it was included in the select board's fiscal year 21 goals under the community health umbrella. And the implementation committee, the working group that branches off of the master plan implementation committee as sort of its parent organization, was formed in 2020. We started meeting, I want to say, late in the summer, and it's comprised of Diane Kennedy from the select board, Clark Brewer from the planning board, Tim Davis from the harbor committee, Michael Sardina, who is a citizen at large with expertise in landscape architecture. We have Chief Sylvia from the fire department and public works, Jason Federico from engineering and public works. I'm sorry, public safety for Chief Sylvia, and then myself for planning. And really what the goal of the Elm Street Corridor initiative is to, hone in on the goal that's been identified in these plans to enhance connectivity between the village and the harbor areas, to improve conditions for, safe pedestrian, cyclist, multimodal use of this corridor, to get to and from. And something that we identified early on was that we need to do sort of a focus group with various stakeholders to begin to narrow the scope. We've been, the Elm Street Corridor Working Group has been meeting with the master plan group and trying to make sure that we're overlapping our initiatives with the other working groups that include economic development as well as zoning, because there's going to be so much focus on this harbor area. And in addition, something that we've identified is that there's construction activity that will be happening in this corridor, whether the water main is going to happen in the nearer future, but then there's also some work with the sewer infrastructure that we can try to coordinate efforts while we're, sort of thinking about this corridor. So here I have just an image of what a typical process and sort of the planning realm is for shaping streets. And I just want to sort of walk through, of course, this is going to vary community to community, and it needs to be in, Cohasset's character as we're looking at this. But these are your typical steps. You sort of do an analysis, you begin to engage stakeholders, and as you can see, that runs throughout the length of the project, throughout all of the different steps here. And what you need to do is you need to hone down a vision. You start with your planning and design, sort of getting, the 25 to 50% threshold about what you might be doing, and then you ultimately come through with complete engineering plans and move forward in sort of technical aspects. That's takes you through building and then maintenance and etc. So these are all, as you see, they move on their own timeline, but I just again want to point out that the stakeholder engagement is something that begins in the beginning and all the way throughout the end. So with that, things that you've heard before, and just I'll walk through some concepts that we've identified to date as to what this working group has been up to. We put together a tentative timeline as to sort of what components we saw. We identified, opportunities to apply for grants and different funding, whether, it be an annual town meeting request or, the different opportunities through the state. So we took a look at how long we might think and tentative work scope and what this might include. We narrowed it down into talking about, the roadway layout. It's what is in the realm of possibility here. So, Jason took a look at what our existing right of way is and sort of what the standards for different sidewalks, travel lanes, things of that nature as they need to be. And sort of that way we can kind of figure out what our sort of options are as to what kind of, configuration we might look at. We've narrowed it down to understanding that we think this, needs to be a phased approach because it's such an important corridor that's so, intimately embedded in the neighborhood. And we realized that in addition to just the corridor design from the village down to the harbor, there's also the triangle configuration right in front of the existing Classic Harbor Inn site. There's, some potential to, think about how that might operate better and safer, for all users. And then we've also, as we have been discussing, we've reached out to Weston and Sampson, who is an engineering and planning firm the town is contracted with for the next 3 years. We did this through, an RFP process several years ago to provide on-call services for our planning and engineering departments. So Weston and Sampson put together a proposal for us that was reviewed with the Elm Street Corridor Working Group, and they voted, they were happy to move forward with this. They thought that it was sort of meeting the goals and scope that we had identified that we would need, particularly in respect to public engagement, because we know this is so important. It's going to be a key component to, building something that is going to work for everybody with public involvement. And particularly, it's even more complicated than it used to be because of this virtual sort of post-COVID world that we're all in, knowing that, you can't do your typical, come to Wilcox Commons and, talk to different people and mingle. And it's complicated even further. So we knew we needed to, have experts who, are used to doing this and have the technology and things available. So we did go back and forth with Weston and Sampson, and you know, we've identified some other additional things. So that's why I'll note in the PowerPoint that you all received on Friday, there was a figure that's actually been updated. I had new information today, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, to talk about what we've completed. As I mentioned, we sort of identified our goals and our timeline, gathered our sort of initial data on what we might need to do, plan on how we would fulfill those needs. We've been communicating back to our sort of parent master plan implementation committee, along with the other working groups. And as I mentioned, the working group itself agreed to proceed with the Weston and Sampson scope, with some tweaks to, you know, include additional public meetings and additional scope, as we really wanted to focus on also the connection to the Harbor Walk and the town dock over there, so that it's a comprehensive picture here. So up next now, we need to secure funding to proceed with this scope. And then again, we'll begin with our public engagement and conceptual design process. That's what this scope is for. And I just want an asterisk again, that public engagement, I'm noting that it's starting here, but this is not you know, a one and done scenario. This is going to be something that continues throughout the scope of the project. So with that, the specific request, the Elm Street Corridor Working Group is requesting that the Select Board approve the designation of $35,550 from one of the existing gift accounts. Oh, I'm sorry, I went too fast. From one of the existing gift accounts, so that we can proceed with the engagement and conceptual design work with Weston and Sampson. The requested account that we're targeting is from the Toll Brothers gift account. It was the town was given as sort of a traffic mitigation payment from the Toll Brothers development, $75,000 in 2013. And with current interest rates, that balance is $98,335.45. Per my last conversation with Don Pyatt, the interest earned on this fund stays with the fund. And there is language that I provided in your packet on Friday that flags that the intent is for transportation or related improvements in town, and that the Select Board has the discretion to reallocate. So again, we feel that this, as it's been, you know, the Elm Street corridor has been so heavily prioritized in the public participation and the plans that, you know, when I came in, these plans had already really been sort of created. And now I'm, as planning director now, I've been working on implementation. So this is something that has been a common theme, has been identified by the public in these processes. And now we're looking to do this so that we can make a progress on this very important corridor. So with that, I'm going to conclude, and I'll stop sharing my screen so that we can take questions. And that's all for now. So thank you. Let me know.
I have a kind of a semantics question, which is, and it's probably to Dawn, is this actually a reallocation since that funding is available for, you know, general transportation needs? And this is a road corridor study. Is it reallocating, or is it just allocating some of that funds to this particular project?
So I believe it's reallocating.
Okay.
When you look at the agreement with Toll Brothers, the money was initially for a specific area.
Okay.
Sorry, I got my notes here. So basically for further improvements to be determined by the Board of Selectmen for Hammond Ave, Beechwood to Beechwood Norman Road, engineering and design, construction pertaining to right of way, as it enters Beechwood opposite 114 Beechwood Street. Then it continues on that the grant of funds may be reallocated by the Board of Selectmen, or the Select Board now, and used for any transportation or related improvements in the town.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it would be proper to reallocate and essentially earmark the funds that they're seeking for whatever dollar value, and then that will just be accounted for and tracked to ensure that they were spent on this new purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. Corey?
And just to clarify, this is a separate fund. I know we also have a fund from the Avalon development, which we talked about for the other MAPC grant. Totally separate fund, correct? This is something that is literally on a different part of town.
Yep, definitely. Okay. Different account, different grant, different purposes. Yep.
Good.
Right.
Thank you.
Jack?
Yeah, I guess my concern would be, fortunately, we're using 35 out of 98,000, but I would say that if I were to support this, which I'm inclined to, I would add that we have an examination of the area that it was originally slated for. The neighbors who are over there, I think, have a reasonable expectation that money that comes from the development right next to theirs is used for any ongoing needs in their area. I think we'll have plenty of money left over, but I would condition any approval upon a study of that. We want to be fair to the neighbors over there.
Katie Dugan, welcome.
Thank you. Jack, to sort of answer your question from a slightly different angle, one of the things that the master plan process did and then the Complete Streets grant application required us to do was analyze in detail what the public's top priorities were in terms of sidewalks. And when you look at both the data that we gathered from the public forums for the master plan and we gathered electronically in the Complete Streets program, that segment that was referred to Hammond Avenue to Beechwood Street is not identified as a priority, nor was it identified as a priority by any of the neighbors. So I think we do have a lot of information just based on our planning processes and Complete Streets, knowing what the segment priorities are in terms of sidewalks. And I just wanted to share that with folks because it's not like this segment that is referred to in 2013 keeps on popping up as a segment that is one that the neighborhood is requesting.
No, but I think it's certainly fair to say that if you put a big development in a certain neighborhood and the developer has to put funds aside that is particularly designated for that neighborhood, yes, the rest of the town might have a lot of serious needs, but I think the neighborhood that was first impacted cannot be forgotten. And when we reallocate, and we are reallocating from the original purpose of this grant, that yes, we can allocate a little bit, but I do believe that we need to respect the intent of that original, which was when you do these things, there's impacts on neighborhoods and developers put money aside for that neighborhood. So I just want to make sure we remember the original neighborhood.
I guess I don't disagree with you, Jack, but
Yeah.
on the other hand, we're the way that the balances is accrued, we're obviously taking really just we're taking the interest income and reallocating it for all intensive purposes, not the principal.
Yeah, I'm going to support this, but I just said I do want to, remain
Point that out,
relatively
yeah.
true to the intent.
Makes sense.
Okay. Well, good news is that Sidewalk Priorities is on the master plan implementation agenda for February 22nd. And so we will reanalyze this particular segment that comes up in the gift agreement. But just to be clear, since we have accrued almost all of the balance that the Elm Street corridor is requesting in interest income, we really wouldn't be touching any more than $10,000 in the principal balance from the original gift.
Great, thanks, Katie. Any questions from other board members? I just feel like I have to say, I personally, I think Elm Street Corridor is such a critical project or projects or a series of projects because it not only brings us to the harbor, which is another priority in town, but it links the village and it links North Main Street and our economic kind of center and hub. So I think all the work that is going to happen, and especially with all the really intentional public meetings that are going to be set up by Weston and Sampson, it's going to bring all of these master plan working group priorities sort of together because everything's connected. And so I'm pretty excited about this. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion on the reallocation of the money. Paul?
So one option to get around that might be in the town meeting, we could potentially allocate money at town meeting to reinstill back into that account of 38,000. Be one way to clear the waters.
Let's see where we get. I think the question now is this something we're willing to vote on so this project moves forward, and then we can look at, based on other priorities in town, how we might want to
vote for it.
Yep. Carrie?
Yeah, I agree. I think this project is critical, and I think we should definitely move ahead with this tonight. And thank you to this working group for all the hard work you've put in so far.
Yeah. Corey, did you have a question? Are you good?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do want to just say that I think Jack's got, I'm very sympathetic to Jack's point about, there are residents on that Beechwood Street there, and there's going to be enough money in the account, but it'd be good to have a conversation with them, just with the residents, say, hey, there's no sidewalk on that street, but it's also not heavily traveled. Is it something you want? And just to, open a line of communication just to see if there's anything on their minds. That way they don't feel like they've been, put out.
Yeah, Katie, do you want to answer that? And then
I'm
move on.
happy to take up that, and I've already noted to revisit this, but I think the context that this board needs in general is one around the sidewalk priorities that were identified in the complete streets, the cost of those segments, and then the engineering complexity of those segments. And I think it's going to be a really eye-opening conversation in terms of like the cost of sidewalks for even the top 5 priorities in town. So I'm not disagreeing with any of the statements here relative to revisiting with Hammond and Beach Street, but I think the bigger context of what the priorities were, what the cost of those priorities are, and some of them have some engineering challenges associated with them, are things that you as a board should have kind of in your toolkit as you talk to residents about transportation and circulation. So that will go on our list of updates to come back to you at some point this spring from Master Plan Implementation Committee.
It's a bigger discussion too, just in terms of these gifts that are made by developers for development purposes, and how those are identified at the time of, and what might become a priority 5 years or 10 years later. So Jack.
Well, I really have to point out that when that was given, it was given to a particular neighborhood that was directly impacted by a very large development.
Right.
And yes, down the line, there will of course be people who will say there's a better and higher and greater need.
Right.
But that was given for that. Now I am willing under this term, especially since a lot of that is interest, to move that we approve the allocation with the understanding that the town will visit the need of Hammond Street neighborhood for transportation related improvements.
Okay. Was that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Roll call.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
Get this
time.
moving. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Okay, moving right along. Can we promote, is Steve Gomer in the waiting room? The next agenda item is Affordable Housing Trust. The trust is requesting, and I'll let Steve do the dog and pony show, but requesting basically some bylaw modifications, and just because we have something that's fully baked, I want to move it forward to town council for inclusion in the warrant. We won't be voting to put it on the warrant yet because we haven't officially warrant, but it needs to go through the due diligence process, and it's just something we can get done soon. So we're not backed up in a month or 6 weeks. So with that, I will ask Steve to show himself. Steve Gomer is chair of the Cohasset Affordable Housing Trust, and he will walk us through this document.
Diane, can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
I can hear you. Yep. Can't
Okay,
see you
great.
though.
Yes, I don't have the option of presenting. I don't think your moderator has clued me into it, so I apologize for that.
Okay. We'll look into see whether we can get you on video, but you're in the room where it happens, so you should be able to activate your own video. But
Was Steve trying to share his screen maybe, and he needs to be a co-host?
There you
No,
go.
there you
We
are.
got you now, Steve.
I think,
All
I
good.
think the high degree of technology is overwhelming everybody. I just got bumped off and bumped back on. Tom Mead is with me as well, and I want to make sure that if he's in the waiting room, someone admits him.
He is. Sorry, I didn't see his last name on there. So Tracy, can you? I think he's coming.
Who are we looking for, Diane?
Tom
at Touchstone, it says.
Sure.
Yeah, there he is. Tom, I'm going to turn, Steve, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. If you could just introduce yourself and Tom, and then we'll go forward.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. And I'm here this evening with Tom Mead, another member of the Affordable Housing Trust. And effectively, the basis for our being here tonight is that the first task we had as a board of trustees was to understand what our fiduciary duty was. And that's defined by the town bylaw and then, of course, by the enacting legislation in the Mass General laws. The review of those two items turned up a number of things that were in conflict with one another, the town bylaw with the state enabling legislation. And so we undertook a review of that with the idea of making the bylaw the most effective tool we can use in order to enact the tasks of the trust. And one specific area that we examined was pieces of the bylaw that called for an activity which no one could define and no documentation existed referencing it. And Tom will get into that. As well, there's another item in the bylaw that while the trust operates independently, requires a regular final permission from the select board. And again, since much of the activity of the trust is real estate oriented, it's not only impractical, it effectively negates the reason to have a trust. Because if the trust can't act independently, then it can't enter into contracts. If it can't enter into contracts, then no one's going to deal with it. And so we've undertaken a review of the bylaw and present that that amended proposed document back to the board tonight for its consideration. Of course, as a bylaw change, any of this is a required vote by town meeting, as you know. And frankly, since we are appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and that appointment power is the ultimate management and control over the Board of Trustees, we believe that it's absolutely required of us that we have the support of the Board of Trustees to propose these changes. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Tom. By the way, I do believe you received, probably late, but you received in your packets both an executive summary of those changes and then a red line version of what those changes would be. So with that, Tom, please take over from here, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of this.
Excuse me, Tom, do you mind just introducing yourself? And
yeah, sure.
with the address? Thank you.
Yeah, Tom Mead, 711 Jerusalem Road. Sorry, I couldn't figure out how to change my screen name. I use my work account. Yeah, so I live at 711 Jerusalem Road, member of the Board of Trustees for the Affordable Housing Trust. As Steve said, one of the first things we did, and as some of you guys know, we filled out the Board of Trustees. Then we actually had to have a declaration of trust drafted and recorded at the Norfolk Registry of Deeds. During that process, as a board, we looked at the DOT, the Declaration of Trust, and realized, as Steve mentioned, there were some things that didn't quite make sense and didn't really allow us to act, as a fiduciary, as a separate body, as a trust would need to, to accomplish its goals, which is to identify and provide and preserve affordable housing in the town. So the changes that came about were really in two areas. First is this idea of oversight and autonomy. If you do have the memo and the red lines, we provided both an actual markup of the original bylaw. And we had quite a bit of back and forth with Cindy Amara, who's outside counsel for the town for land use stuff. And after dealing with her, she also has quite a bit of experience in affordable housing and with this type of trust work. So I just kind of walked through one by one the changes. I assume, Diane, that's like good enough for intro, and we'll just get right into the changes, or
Yep, just
any other
kind of quickly walk
broad
us through.
questions on how we landed here, I guess, might be quick pause.
Yep, anybody just general questions now, or should Jack?
I'm just trying to find that. When was it sent?
The original markup was sent on Friday with the red line of the old one versus the new one. And then yesterday, we forwarded a memo that has a summary of the changes.
I believe Jen Oram would have sent those out yesterday afternoon.
That was Monday, okay.
So from the original, I'll just hop right into the original bylaw. We first run into this idea of autonomy in section B, subsection 10, where the trust would be required to come back for a majority vote by the Board of Selectmen for to make any borrowings or mortgages of trust assets. And so again, this gets back to autonomy. The whole idea here, and always a specific example I know is probably helpful. So 808 Jerusalem Road, you guys are all familiar with that. The town took it back, on a tax taking, and then there was an actual process to deed it from the town to the Affordable Housing Trust. Right, so now that is a trust property, not a property of the town. And so we would hypothetically be able to go mortgage that property. And the way this bylaw was originally written was, it says we would have to come back to the Board of Selectmen if we wanted to take a piece of trust property and put a mortgage on it. And, again, reference here, the enabling legislation in the state statutes, it provides for this idea of an independent trust, and any borrowing instrument of the trust is going to have stamped on it very clearly that this is a borrowing of the trust and not an obligation of the town.
The town, right.
So, we as a trust are not able to bind the town in any way or put the town on the hook for any of the borrowings or anything like that. So again, make clear that idea that these are two very separate and distinct entities. So 808 Jerusalem Road, as you can imagine, if the town has decided to, transfer title to that property to the Affordable Housing Trust so that we can move forward, with the ability to develop that into affordable housing, we then need the autonomy to enter into all types of contracts, whether it be with Habitat for Humanity, or, there are some affordable housing trusts that are very active developers themselves. And so we would need to have the autonomy to enter into contracts, for example, with a developer directly, GC, whatever those might be. And as Steve notes, we wouldn't be able to deal with anyone, whether that was a contractor or a potential buyer of the land, if we couldn't unilaterally, accept offers, sign the final deeds and those types of things. So relatively straightforward. I think the idea, from talking to Steve a little bit about the history was, maybe previous boards, Board of Selectmen, wanted to have a little more control, and it's not a bad idea. But in practice, once you have a fully functioning and separate AHT, that wants to be fully functioning and totally separate. So that's the change in B10, which would again allow us to make those borrowings, with the stamp that's required that says not an obligation of the town. The next one is in B14, and we identified this one early as well. This was a very limiting item here. B14 originally said that the Affordable Housing Trust could provide grants or loans to assist home buyers to purchase or rehabilitate a dwelling unit in the town of Cohasset. And again, I'll point to a hypothetical example involving 808 Jerusalem Road. So hypothetically, we can, so we've gotten an RFP from, I don't know, actually, so we got one response to the RFP, which we're considering. And if that respondent wants us to deed the property to them, and then a lot of times a respondent might ask us for a $50,000 grant to do their preliminary study, for example. And if we kept B14 the way it was, we wouldn't be able to make those grants to developers, nonprofit developers, to do their preliminary studies, which is very common, very typical use of affordable housing trust funds. We would be unable to do that in the old bylaw, because the old bylaw said we can only, provide these grants to homeowners. So again, I think, relatively straightforward. It was a good enough idea when the bylaw was drafted, but too limiting for, how the AHT really, will want to act in the real world. So that's B14. Section C is what Steve identified as, there was just really, they called for this thing called an allocation plan. And we looked everywhere and couldn't find a definition of an allocation plan. And so the idea here again is to just provide the autonomy to the trust to, make its expenditures, identify housing, enter into contracts. Of course, we would, just like all the other boards and committees in the town, provide an annual report, for inclusion in the wider town report, as well as there's a requirement for audited financial statements on an annual basis by the trust. So, there'll be very clear transparency with regard to the finances and where the money has gone and how it's been spent and pledged and all those things. So we just took, again, not a bad idea in the beginning, but just not well defined or not defined at all. And we've just cleaned it up to say, we'll act like other boards. We will, of course, report on an annual basis to you guys, both sort of a narrative report, including short and long-term goals, as well as audited financials. And just kind of back to that point of oversight. Yeah, as Steve mentioned, you guys do have the power of appointment, right? The trustees serve as appointed for terms by the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board. And the Select Board also has a seat actually on the trust. One of the 7 trustees, must be one of the members of the Select Board. So, and then there was just, then the very last thing was to clean up definitions. Sure you guys have, waded at least, partway into the pool of affordable housing and the myriad of, definitions, right? What's capital A affordable housing versus low A versus workforce housing versus, all these other things. So what we did here was, what we wanted to do was align ourselves very specifically with Chapter 40B. Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B. Our goal here is to, increase and maintain a stock of affordable housing, above that 10% threshold. And so we brought in the idea of this definition, subsidized housing inventory, which matches up just exactly with 40B. And we're saying, anything that can identify, provide, maintain, preserve SHI, subsidized housing units, that's where we are allowed to spend our time and resources. So that's a pretty broad overview. Again, we did have help from outside counsel. I didn't get into my background. I do have a background in affordable housing. I previously worked at a company called Boston Capital, which is a national developer of affordable housing tax credit syndicator. So, have some amount of experience reading through these, partnerships and the requirements and, and all that type of stuff. So, and the other thing too is with subsidy stacking. So not only do we have things like 808 Jerusalem Road, but as the trust gets funded, and I know you guys just had a conversation about mitigation payments from developers. I know the planning board is hard at work trying to put together a payments in lieu structure where, instead of providing affordable housing for the inclusionary zoning, developers will be able to make payments in lieu. And those payments would be made to the AHT. So the idea would be, as there's more and more development in town, the AHT actually has some coffers, has some money in the bank, and we would be able to provide grants and loans and second mortgages and forgivable mortgages, what they call subsidy stacking. It's so difficult in Massachusetts to develop affordable housing because of the cost of land and construction and everything else, that when for-profit and nonprofit developers need to do subsidy stacking. So they go from all the way from like federal low-income housing tax credits to state grants from like, Mass Housing and DHCD, down to us on the local level. The Affordable Housing Trust would be a provider potentially of grants or soft second mortgages in that subsidy layering once we have, actual dollars to spend. So again, some of those overall changes that we've made in this bylaw, it will allow us to operate in that manner.
Thank you, Tom. How lucky are we to have your expertise, both in town and on the Affordable Housing Trust? So if there's any questions, ask again. The idea now is to just, I'd like to have us take a vote to kind of move this into the process of getting it reviewed by our council for the town warrant, and then eventually put it in front of the voters. So, Carrie?
Thank you for walking through that with us, Tom. I think you really clarified everything that I was wondering about. Just making sure too that you change all Board of Selectmen to the select boards on this draft as well, as we're making bylaws changes.
Makes sense.
Thanks, Carrie. Corey?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've talked with a few people on affordable housing in the past, just the speed at which we need to improve the speed at which we operate in this field, and having the Affordable Housing Trust be able to operate with some more autonomy could certainly speed things along, because select board meetings are already busy as there is, and we don't want to lose years and years and years just scheduling stuff. At the same time, obviously, having autonomy of a board that I know that in your document said, there's no risk to the town, or the town won't be liable for any of the debts that Affordable Housing Trust. However, I have some reservations, and Steve, I mean, you were a select board member for a long time, and I don't know if you were part of this original setup. From a select board point of view, is this a healthy amount of autonomy, or is it something that you have any concerns about? I mean, from that point of view, asking you to put on a different hat in this case, Steve.
Thanks for the question, Corey. The short answer is that it's frankly, it's necessary if a trust is to operate effectively. And it's as simple as it gets. The power of appointment is no small thing. All right. I recognize that in most cases, when the select board is looking for people to fill out a committee, more often than not, it's whoever shows up is going to get appointed.
Right.
And I have to say that, yeah, from the outset, I was involved with my board colleagues in structuring and identifying, the original appointed members of this trust in order to get it to a quorum, and then the follow-on board, yourselves, have appointed the remainders. And it really is critical to when you have an independent operating trust with its own independent financial structure, that as the old saying goes, choose wisely, Skywalker. Right? It's absolutely necessary if the Affordable Housing Trust, no matter who sits on the board, is able to act effectively and in a fiduciary capacity. And these are very small but functionally important items within the language of the trust. I was living in the town, and I think Paul might have been here then as well, when the original Affordable Housing Trust was enacted. And to say that it was put together in a hurry and with great intention would be about accurate. And it wasn't until 3 years ago that it was thoroughly re-examined for reinitiation, because for the prior 10 years, it had been dormant. There had been no members on the trust. So this is truly a startup or a restart, I suppose, is the best way to put it. Corey, it's a very thoughtful question. In my opinion, it's absolutely necessary. And Tom's point, by the way, is not an opinion as to whether or not the town is, that town of Cohasset becomes a responsible financial party to activities of the trust. That's actually through state law as well as through our own bylaw. We cannot enter into any contract that in any way obligates the town of Cohasset by way of moral or direct obligation. It's always going to be on the trust.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Paul, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was living here right when they first started, and that was really the first go at it. I mean, I remember looking at one of the initial drafts. There were sections that had listed the town of Duxbury. And so this is the first real revamping to fit the Massachusetts general law. And more importantly, giving it the authority and independence that a true trust needs to make decisions regardless of, input from the town, so that these are independent decisions, independent fiduciary responsibility, and to be able to act fairly quickly when it comes to real estate, where you have a piece of property or a mortgage that needs to be executed. This will allow this to fit with both the town, the trust, and the Massachusetts general laws.
To
Thanks,
Paul's
Paul.
point, just to illustrate that, I think the number is 837 Hull Street came onto the marketplace. That is adjacent to 808 Jerusalem.
It makes 808 a lot more attractive. Yeah.
Yeah, and apparently the listing realtor came to the town and said, "Hey, you guys have right of first refusal." We had a meeting 2 days later in which we agreed to go see it as soon as possible. It's too late. It's already under contract. Okay,
It
so
was a bidding war. Yeah, I remember that.
those are examples of of the realities that we face. We've got to come up with operating methods that will allow us to act even more rapidly than is required to take a meeting, take a vote, go. All right.
Right.
So
Jack has a question, and then Paul Kears, I'll recognize you, and then I want to try to move on so we can stay to our agenda. Again, the idea is to get this in our own town queue and review process, and then it'll come back to us for further discussion and inclusion, and a vote for inclusion on the warrant. So Jack?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm relying upon what I heard, because I looked in my inbox and I can't find the wordage, at all. And I deal with real estate trusts, probably 15 or 20 of them a month. So I'm a little bit familiar. There's two elements of decision making. Some is the operational thing, and clearly a trust needs to be able to operate on a day-to-day basis. Where I would have concerns, and I don't know really the answer yet, is on strategic large things, because as I believe that most of the assets in the Affordable Housing Trust, in fact, come directly or indirectly from either the town or as a result of town regulations and actions. So I think the town does have an interest in that. I think that there probably is a workaround that would allow what the trust needs to do to move it effectively. I don't think the Board of Selectmen, but I'm still open. I haven't read the fine print of the language, and I know I read that a lot. So I'd be willing to send this on for review, but I would reserve the right to have some questions upon the operations.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring this to another discussion closer to inclusion on the warrant. Paul Kears, you get the last word.
Sure, I've been on the Affordable Housing Steering Committee since it started for the last 5 or 6 years. I spent a lot of time working with state agencies, trying to help the town get funding, apply for grants. And the biggest problem we have is that the trust wasn't set up, it wasn't funded. And then once we did set it up and get it funded, it was not activated to the level that is standard in the state, which is what Tom and Steve are putting in front of you. So what they're requesting is standard in just about all the towns in Massachusetts that have these housing trusts. They do operate independently, although they do coordinate with the towns on a regular basis, and they do coordinate with the CPC funding. And all of that is taken into consideration on town level. So though they do operate and make decisions separately, like Steve said, they do report annually, and the selectmen do have the ability to change trustees. But this is very critical for the town. We lost the ability to apply for grants or receive grants because of these issues surrounding the trust. So I would encourage moving this forward as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you, Paul. Okay, absent any other questions, if somebody would like to make a motion to move this forward in the process and have it reviewed to come back to us for a vote to include on the warrant.
I move that we accept the proposed amendment changes to the bylaw language for the Affordable Housing Trust.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Great, thank you. Tom and Steve, very good work.
Thank you,
Much
guys.
appreciated.
Thank you all, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the youth center proposal. Tracy.
Hooray, hooray, hooray.
Actually, the next item is actually the.
I said early
Committee.
February, Jack. Here we are.
I know, I said
Not yet,
we
not
promised
yet.
the kids they'll have their
Got something
youth center.
first.
The Harbor Committee is next, actually, Diane.
Harbor Committee is next.
Oh, shoot. Sorry. I'm looking at the clock and at the time. I apologize. Harbor Committee. So Tim Davis is here. I know some of the other Harbor Committee members are on the sidelines, and Michelle Leary is going to give us an update sort of on what's been going on infrastructure wise. And then Tim is going to run by us a proposal for a infrastructure committee. So I apologize on the agenda.
So I hope everyone's as excited to hear about this as they are about the teen center. So we do have several projects in the works. We are focusing on the Parker Ave boat ramp, the Government Island Wharf. We're also focusing on cement docks, Lori's Harbor Master office. And these are all things that are going to work in conjunction with one another. So the first project is the Parker Ave boat ramp. We've been working on that for some time. We did secure funding from Seaport Economic Council in the amount of $170,000, and that is for engineering and design. May 1st, we're applying for our construction funding from the Seaport Economic Council, and we hope to break ground, if all goes well and we get the funding approved, Columbus Day of 2021. We are asking Capital or CPC for a 25% match on this project. So we do have that before them this year. Also, the Government Island Wharf, we've been talking a lot about what the best system is. Is it a boom lift system? Is it a conveyor system? And it seems like consensus right now is a conveyor system is probably the best system for the fishermen at this time. It's a short-term goal. It's something that we can get installed fairly quickly without all the infrastructure improvements needed to the wharf to get the boom lift system and perhaps the true system that the Government Island Wharf needs. So for the Government Island Wharf project, the lift system comes in at about $60,000. We did receive $160,000 for this project for design and engineering. The total project for the Government Island Wharf is not to break ground until fall of 2022. We're going to complete the Parker Ave boat ramp first. That would be this fall. Next spring, we would work on the Harbor Master's office. We would also work this fall on the cement dock at the Cove to be ready for 2022. As far as the Harbor Master office, Laurie has been working with South Shore Votech to get them to build it. So it's a great partnership. She's doing great work there. I did speak to her today, and they are hopeful that if some of the restrictions of COVID lift, that they'll be able to start working on it next spring. So that's also a great project. The only other outstanding project that I see for the harbor that I'm actually working on with Laurie is that list of, I guess, needs that Tim has provided. So Laurie and I, over the next 2 weeks, are going to go through that list, and we're going to almost prioritize that list and see where we can match some grant funding with other projects going on in the harbor. If something's happening in Marshfield and they're doing some dredging, maybe we should start dredging because the cost of mobility is already there, and we can piggyback on their projects. So there's a lot of thought going into this. We're not forgetting about the harbor. It's top of mind, and we're trying to knock off as many projects as we can and secure as much grant funding as we can to complete them.
Michelle, a question. I'm hearing reverb, sorry. A question regarding like any funding requests from town meeting, and with specifically the conveyor belt or the Parker Ave boat ramp. Is there any funding that is likely to be needed, or is there, like the Seaport Economic Council, what's the likelihood that we're going to get that funding?
So it's a high likelihood that we'll get the funding. However, they do require a 25% match. So that is what we're asking for at annual town meeting for both projects. Because if we want to accelerate government wharf, we want to have that funding in place. We may be asking for government wharf at fall town meeting because we won't need that funding until the spring. But as far as Parker Ave, we will need to secure that at annual town meeting. And we are looking to secure the funds at annual town meeting for the cement docks and fall town meeting for Laurie's office.
And what about the conveyor system?
So the conveyor system is something we look for at annual town meeting this year, just the conveyor piece itself.
Any other questions? Select board, Paul?
So the lift and then a conveyor belt to put on the wharf. Is there any talk of an ice machine for a industrial size ice production for the fishing fleet, for storage and for shipping?
I haven't heard that request. So my answer is right now, no. But if that's something that we should be looking into, just let us know and we'll put that on the list.
Okay, it just if there's a significant fresh fish coming in, you need a icing availability, that's all.
Okay.
Good segue, unless anybody has a question, to Tim Davis, who does have a list of about 95 things that came out of the harbor planning process, and his committee is been trying to tackle how best to prioritize and bucket them. So one of the things he's here tonight to talk about is in the kind of to reflect the master plan implementation working groups, is setting up something similar for the harbor plan. So Tim?
Thank you, Diane. Let me first say that I think we all know how fortunate we are in Cohasset to have so many volunteers, many of whom are here doing the work of this community. I also would like to say that, seeing how I don't think any of us are asleep after going through the post-employment benefits dissertation.
How about that?
We will get to that later, but I do want to call out some of the employees of the town that have been incredibly helpful, personally to me and to all of us who serve on committees, but Lauren and Michelle and Don and Brian and Tracy. There are others that have been, we have a great core of employees here in this town. And Chris, thank you for your leadership in this. We do, and the Harbor Committee has worked for the last 3 years putting together the Cohasset Municipal Harbor Plan, and we are now into the implementation phase. We have two what have been referred to as subcommittees, but Diane has suggested maybe working groups. And hopefully you have the charge for the first one, which is the infrastructure, that we would like to get you to have you approved today, because that will get us started on, Diane referred to 90, I think there are about 52 projects that are critical in the
Prone to
harbor.
exaggeration.
Many of them connect with other initiatives that are going on in the town. The Elm Street corridor ties into the harbor through the Cohasset Harbor Inn project and the Captain's Walk that will go hopefully from the Oaks to Government Island. There are public-private partnerships that have got to be worked on and negotiated and collaborated on with. We have issues like dredging that are been part of this harbor for 200 years. We have many other issues. So I would ask you to approve the subcommittee / working group for the infrastructure tonight. There is a small group of people that are working on the governance. Paula Curran is one of those, and I know she's here tonight. Lisa Hewitt is also part of that, and we'll get that shortly so that we can start to implement all these projects, which are critical not only to the harbor, but to the community at large. So thank you again. Thank you for doing what you do, both volunteers and employees of the town. We have a great town, and let's do some great things.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, after I read through the charge, my only comment was to call it a working group because it's set up very similar to the other working groups as opposed to a subcommittee of a larger committee. So because it really isn't a subcommittee, it is asking for 3 citizen at large positions. The Cohasset Harbor Master, the commercial fisherman. Tim, do you think that that we have a Cohasset resident as a commercial fisherman? Because that might be a position we put on there as a representative ex officio, because this isn't a voting deliberative body.
Exactly, and I totally concur. My hope is that regardless of who actually sits officially on this working group, there will be others in the community that will participate. I'm trying to get the one commercial fisherman who does live in the town to agree to be on part of that working group. But there are other commercial fishermen that I've been in contact with that will participate from time to time, depending on the issue. So I see this as kind of a core number of people that will roll up their sleeves and start working on it, but we will pull in other members of the community. And of course, open meeting law says that it's open to the community. So we will have the meetings, we will deal with issues, but anybody can participate. They're welcome to.
Does any of the board members have questions just in general about structure? I think one of the urgencies is to try to solicit applications for the 3 citizen positions for this committee. So I personally would like to wordsmith it just a tiny bit, but if we could approve it in theory and let everybody know that there is going to be a working group convene for this purpose, and so that we can start accepting applications from the community for appointment as soon as we have a critical mass of applications, that would be great. Jack has his hand up.
Unmute yourself, Jack. Jack.
Why? First time somebody's asked me to unmute myself. What's going on here?
You've never been asked to do that before, Jack.
No, it's generally the other way. Sometimes it takes 3 or 4 people holding me down, but that's another story. So I guess not just for us, but for the people who are watching, and there are a lot of people, I think we need to clarify that these are working groups. They don't have any authority to bind the town, and I think that's important. And I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and a lot of very good people have been working on it. And So I think it's important to do that, but I do think we ought to clarify that these are not, have the ability to pass regulations or bind the town in any way.
No, they do not. No, absolutely. There will be recommendations made that will go to the select board and to the town manager. That's as far as any authority is concerned, is recommendations. A lot of this is going to be research. I mean, as an example, we don't know who has jurisdiction over the breakwater. It happens to be on property that's in the jurisdiction of Situate, but we don't know who actually has jurisdiction over the breakwater. The breakwater is inundated on almost every serious northeast storm, and it's only a precursor to what's going to happen. We need to deal with the breakwater, but first of all, we need to find out who has jurisdiction. So that's one thing, and we're not. That doesn't require any authority. It requires some research to say, okay, it's the Army Corps, or it's the state of Massachusetts, or the federal government, or my great aunt Lucy, or whoever it is. We need to find it out.
Yeah, one nice thing about the kind of the genius behind the structure of these working groups has been that these conversations are happening with the relevant staff members who can, help out and parse out and understand what the kind of top of mind is of the committee members. So it works really well. I think it's been working really well in the master plan working groups. Corey, you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are so many harbor issues, 52, as Tim said, and having a focused effort on them, I think may bring some clarity to some things. One of the wordsmithing things I would suggest to add here is just to clarify a little bit about what infrastructure means, and that you're really talking about water touching, adjacent stuff. It's not the harbor itself. It's really, so that's the only kind of tweak I would do, is define infrastructure a little more narrowly. That way, this committee has a really, really tight focus. This working group, sorry.
Yeah, could I recommend, Carrie, I see your hand too, but one thing I would like to do is maybe approve in concept, let people know that we're seeking applications, and then maybe we each send any wordsmithing changes to Tracy, and then between Tim and me, we can get it to a point where we can just rubber stamp approval next week. I would like to conceptually say we want to move forward with this and start getting it happening. Carrie, and then Lauren, I see you want to weigh in too.
No, I agree real quick. And I know we've mentioned this before with other things, but I do think we're at a point where we should strongly consider allowing maybe a fisherman or captain who isn't a town resident to serve on this officially and not just participate, especially because I know Tim has shared that, it is really hard getting a Cohasset fisherman or lobsterman to participate. So I do think that is a discussion we should be having, and maybe consider opening it up to that.
And I think as a working group and making that the designated, like the staff members that are on here as well as their ex officio, that could hopefully take care of that. I think when you get into the real committee structure and appointment structure, it's a little more complicated. Corey, Lauren, sorry. Like Corey, and then Lori, the harbor master, and then Lauren.
Thank you, everyone. Hello again, Lauren Lind. Last time I'll be on your agenda for tonight, so thank you all for your time. And I just wanted to add that I've been intimately involved with helping grade these charges. So if anybody, if you're comfortable sending edits directly to me, I'd be happy. I can wait until the end of the week and then have something turned around to you as soon as possible to get those tweaks addressed in the charge.
That sounds perfect. Okay. Paul?
So I would move that we agree to the Harbor Infrastructure Planning Subcommittee charge with the one comment with the ex officio. Typically, ex officio is a member that is appointed by position and is a voting member. So you'd have to wordsmith who is going to be a voting member. That's all.
I think there are no voting members on this, the way Diane has suggested it.
Okay.
So
It's like the other working groups. So basically, Paul, you're recommending that we go forward with this with some wordsmithing that we can officially approve next week?
Yes.
Okay. Jack?
Yeah, to emphasize what Tim just said. My understanding is the working groups then report to the Harbor Committee. Am I right on that, Tim?
Well, certainly we would do, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
report to is a concept that.
Well, you know what I mean.
And that's
Certainly
noted.
The Harbor Committee would be informed of anything without any question, but the recommendations would go through the Harbor Committee to the select board.
That's what I mean, because so for people who are concerned about the authority is of the Harbor Committee. They've worked hard, and these will feed into the Harbor Committee, and then the Harbor Committee will make their recommendations. So I think that's a great idea, because I know the Harbor Committee's done a very good job, as have you, Tim, with a couple of exceptions, but no, I'm kidding. But anyway, I'm done.
Great, thank you. And that is expressly stated in the
I know that.
the charge. Thank you.
Want to make sure we don't get phone calls.
Excellent. I appreciate that. I have enough. Paul, did you make that? Was that a motion?
So that was a motion. Yes, there's a motion on the
Okay.
floor.
Thank you very much. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, roll call beginning with Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
And Tim, could we set a deadline for just letting people know that there are these 3 citizen positions open, and maybe we ask for applications in 2 weeks? Does that make sense?
Yeah, who should we send that to? To the community at large?
Those applications have to go through Tracy, and the application is online.
Yeah, but how do we let people know? You said let people know. Is there any process for letting the community know that those are available?
They usually, positions that are available are posted on the website, and all of us going out and telling people.
Okay.
Lauren,
No,
did you?
That's fine.
I was just going to add, I'm happy to draft some language to go out in the town manager's weekly report that can be distributed about this, so people can know about the opportunity.
Should have mentioned that. Chris does a great job summarizing.
Thank you.
Okay, we're in good shape. This is
Thank you,
terrific.
Diane. Thank you
Thanks,
all.
Tim.
Thanks,
Yep,
Tim.
thank you.
Thanks for your hard work. Thanks, Harbor Committee folks.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Okay, Jack. The moment you've been waiting for.
We're going to have a youth center.
Youth center
And
proposal.
we promised that the Board of Selectmen, the Select Board promised. We're getting there. So I think let's go on with this presentation. Nicole, our
So I'm going to take
hero.
over. I'm going to take over the meeting.
right,
Thank
okay.
you.
Yes,
So
Madam
we
Chairman.
have Nicole Balashi from Safe Harbor, Ted from Cohasset Rec, and Megan James from Cohasset Library. And I'll let you guys walk us through your presentation. And thanks for getting it to us ahead of time.
Awesome. And do you want me to screen share, or will Tracy be putting it up?
I have given it to you, Nicole, if you want to run it yourself. And as Nicole teased this up, I just want to say that this has been a tremendous amount of work over the last year, and we kind of had to push the reset button after COVID. But I think as a result, there was a lot more good input, and the schools were able to partner with us in an even more in-depth way, because they now have a new principal, John Mills, at the middle school, has been really a very proactive member of this whole effort. So you're going to hear from Nicole and Megan and Ted as to various aspects of this. And I think it's going to be very informative. And then we're going to ask the select board to give some buy-in at the end of this. So here we go.
Thank you, Chris. So as mentioned, Nicole Balashi from Safe Harbor Cohasset Coalition. And thank you, Select Board, for giving us the opportunity this evening to kind of present on what we have come up with in regards to some type of alternative activity, alternative location for the youth of Cohasset. Megan James from the library is here, but it will really be myself and Ted Carroll who will be presenting. This is a supported initiative by Paul Pratt Memorial Library and Safe Harbor, but it's really a recreation-driven initiative. So I'll let Ted take the reins, but I did want to open up with kind of the outline for this evening. So I'll go over the survey results that we put together as a team back in March, and then take you step by step. And so our plan back in March was to really launch this with the youth throughout all the schools. And then, of course, as everyone knows, COVID was the story. So we had to take a step back. Our goal was 500 or more community members, and we went beyond our goal, which we were really excited about. We have 573 respondents, and about a fifth of those respondents were youth ages 12 to 17. And so we broke it down between two target populations of who responded. So 101 youth within Cohasset ages 12 to 17. And then we had 317 respondents within the ages of 35 to 54, which we really saw as the population that would be our parent clientele, if you will. So of those youth that responded, 50% said that there is a need for a youth center. And I'm using the term youth center, but Ted will explain that we're hoping to open up the naming of this location to the youth themselves so that it's a little bit cooler than youth center or teen center. And then of the 101 youth that responded, 41% said that they would use it. So we have it broken down between the percentage that said there's a need and who would actually use it. So that's a good response rate. And then we had, out of the 317 parents, quote unquote, 222 said that there was a need, and that 212 felt that someone within their family would use the center. We had a section of the survey that asked kind of their suggested activities, and 74% responded that they would suggest an air hockey or foosball table, ping pong, crafts, etc. Of those respondents, 98% were 12 to 17-year-olds. So that's really what we'd want to focus on. Kind of like a drop-in, unstructured area for the youth of Cohasset. 83% suggested some type of tutoring or homework center. 86% of those respondents were ages 12 to 17 years of age. And within that section, there were a lot of extra comments. So we tried to summarize the majority of them. So from ages 12 to 17, you can see here, I won't read all of them, but kind of the consensus was to have it, like I mentioned, an unstructured drop-in hangout center, just a place for the youth to congregate. There really isn't an area like that in town, and a lot of them think that would be successful. And then for the parents, it was kind of very similar. So unstructured time, space for them to hang out, a place to drop in, just lounge, socialize. Some mentioned having a basketball or outdoor space, and then areas for extra music, Xbox, etc. So I'm going to let Ted take it from here for staffing and operations, and then at the end, all three of us are here for questions.
Hello, everyone. Ted Carroll, Cohasset Recreation. So as we go forward, one of the key components of this is also the new assistant director for the recreation department, and Chris and I have been talking about this for a couple of years now. So, tie in very well with this position will be sort of the center coordinator, and then just looking forward, as we move forward, this building's been in place for a long time, but we've had a great response for our last 10 years for our middle school program. It used to have about 12 kids in it. Now we fill in 8 minutes with like 500 kids. So, we've developed a great relationship with parents and teenagers. Having Nicole on board with Safe Harbor has been a great coalition too. So it's really, the timing is perfect. We have a good relationship with the schools, with Megan at the library too. So, and what's interesting is that there used to be a youth resource committee in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's sort of been merged to where the youth ambassadors are now. So it's a nice little history lesson where we learn from the teenagers back 20 years ago to now we're working with teenagers as youth ambassadors. So and the support staff, 10 years ago we only hired 12 kids. Now we hire 100. So we have a great group of staff that could work for us year round. Leaders in their classes, seniors in high school, different relationships there. So, and then we have developed some policies and procedures, but I think that we're going to hold off on that till we get moving forward. So we have looked at different options over the last year or so. And I told Chris I'll keep this short with a history lesson. So, the Drug and Alcohol Committee back in the 1990s looked at teen centers and the town formed a youth resource committee, which was under the jurisdiction of my predecessor, Jack Woolley. And there were attempts. We were at Dooley's, which I remember I was there for a supervisor at one point, and then they went to Seabird. But the standalone centers are tough to keep up with. And so back in '97, when the DPW moved out of this building here downtown, the Jack and that whole committee with teenagers and adults spent about 16 months fundraising and getting that building to where it is now to be used as a teen center. So it's come a long way, and it's what that group 21 years ago envisioned this building to be for the teens. So a standalone center was tough. I know the first decade they were paying all the bills and trying to run. There's no fees coming in, and it's tough to just do a dance once a month and pay the salaries, pay all the utilities. So when I was hired, this was our main source of programming. We had programs there day and night along with the auditorium. So it was always a very busy building from that point on. And even after in 2015, we moved to Sawyer Street, this building actually got stronger, and we had programs running all day and all night. But we looked at other options also, but ideally this is a great location. It's a indestructible building. I think it's over 100 years old. It's got great bones. There's some minor work that has to be done, but it's in a central location, easy to get to for the kids to walk down from school or walk downtown. So that's all I have for that slide. But as I mentioned, we've been using this building pretty steady since 2008 for multiple and 3 of these pictures are the dance studio. We have the kids there from 9 to 3 every day, and the dance studio from 3 to 9, and then Safe Harbor Friday nights. And as you see, I also use it for meetings and for classes. But it's been since 2015. It's probably one of the most popular buildings. Like I said, we're open about 70 hours a week down there. That was pre-COVID. So obviously we've taken a hit since COVID's kicked in, but our dance studio has been down there since December. So it's been keeping the building active a little bit. And then just to give you guys, what this is the present building as the inside of the building, because I don't know how many of you have actually been in it. But the only couple of things that are missing here is we did buy some booths about 10 years ago from Starland, and they're the nice strong booths that last pretty well. And then Nicole has a stage down there for their ground level nights, and we also have a dance floor in a corner. So, but this is the present layout of the building, and we did have a building inspection, fire inspection just last month. Just a couple of things to work on, but we'll also put some quotes together for other items. But I just want to give you a layout of what the building looks like inside. So, and then we've done some work on the budget on what we need to do. I'll go to the left first. So the double doors that you saw in that one photo do need a replacement. We do have a little bit of leakage in there. The windows and the toilets, when they were installed with low budget residential equipment. So they do need to, there's a lot of rotting. Some of the windows don't open. The toilets are, as I said, residential. So, I mean, we have an initial cost, and then we have a one-time expense cost, including the vending machine, which we might get one, hopefully, but if not, and the equipment and furniture is basically just anything beyond what we have now. And regarding the budget, this will be, under the recreation department, it'll be a third. What you see there is that director position is pretty much a third of his job as a teen center. So that's where we do that accounting there. Then, as I mentioned, the utilities, this is what we pay pretty much every year, the $5,000 between the major utilities. And then yearly, unfortunately, ping pong tables, even a commercial one, does not usually last too long in a rec center. So I always, in my Hingham rec days, we always buy a new table every year, and then just some supplies and equipment and games. So those are the two budget items to look at. And then going forward, just continuing on, we looked at looking at furniture, like, and Megan's photo there from the library, and then just having a simple setup inside with ping pong tables. It is great. We always get donated equipment. I know Nicole got a nice air hockey table. So we have the equipment, just maybe a ping pong table. And then there's a couple photos here of our programs that we do in that building, but those would be a little, on the weekends or something like that. So the sample week will just, obviously the kids I think the kids get out of school right around 3 o'clock, so they'll be down shortly thereafter, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6. We do after 6 o'clock, we can do multiple programs, have meeting, have, if groups want to have meetings, they could use the space. I actually foresee our dance studio, which will move to Sawyer Street, having a second option here at night for some adult classes, which I've been trying to ask my dance instructor to do. Then Friday nights are ground level nights, and if Nicole and the Safe Harbor group wants to do more, they could. So it'll be a busy building, busy building again too, once we get up and running. So, and this is basically the timeline that's been, since been ongoing. Once the location is chosen, and just refer to Chris about the budget items. But and the other key position is the assistant director. So ideally having him or her hired by July 1 to get used to be part of our extreme program, part of whatever we do this summer, and then get the ball rolling right around Labor Day. So the one step we have to do here is obviously move our dance studio. They will be here in the summer, but obviously during the school year, they would move to Sawyer Street second floor. So there is some work to do upstairs to help with the noise.
So, Chris, what action do you need specifically tonight? And what kind of money is there any money commitment that needs to get made before town meeting with respect to any of the capital expenses?
So that's the next question. So there's two things that we want the board's direction on here. One is that this is something you want to move forward with, and that's the first point here. That this is the start, and that this is something you want us to move forward with. The second piece is the funding, and as Ted pointed out, there's two different aspects to it. One is if you say, yeah, we got to get this building, we want this building, we want to get it done. Chris, prioritize $25,000 in capital in one-time cost. If I can, do an article or something, so we can get that done and get it all prepped. And then with the equipment, the same thing. Some of that equipment we might be able to get donated. We might be able to get some grant for. But again, if we want to get some new furniture or some other pieces of equipment, I think we need to have that money available. In terms of operations, as Ted pointed out, we're going to blend that into the recreation revolving fund. So it'll be an off-budget expense, just like the rest of the rec programs are. And be able to put an employee that won't be carried on the tax, won't be carried by taxes, it'll be carried by programmatic fees. And again, point out, because the programs have expanded so much over the last 5 years, there really is another need for someone to work full-time with Ted on programming. And that person then spends a chunk of their time here. And actually, it's a very nice blend because, you know, much like the school resource officer, you know, interacts with the kids at various places. An assistant director would be doing much the same thing. And then, you know, it becomes a gateway for the kids from the summer program to join here, and from here to the summer program, and you name it, right? And also, you know, the location also allows for more future programming with the local business community, right? We'd love to develop partnerships with, you know, some of the businesses downtown and all of that. And it's a real, you know, what's been really great about this is it's a real collaboration. You know, the programming, as Ted said, there's a long history here, and I think it'd be really interesting to hear more of it, because, you know, the town has a very deep commitment to this, and this is a kind of a new version, right? It's a 21st century look at this, and because of the way the rec program is built and developed, there's funding streams. You know, some of the money that gets spun off from some of these programs helps support programs like this that don't really generate revenue but are super critical. And and even like the vending machine, right? The schools have their own managed healthy vending machines. We want to like replicate that here. The kids already have that at the school, right? So we want to have that replicated here. And again, if we get partners from the local business community, that's awesome. So those are the two asks, Diane. Is this program good? Is this what you're looking for? And second, prioritizing some of this funding. Again, in terms of operational funding, I'm comfortable that the rec board's behind this, Ted, right? And then in terms of the equipment stuff, in terms of the building cost, I need that kind of green light so I can, you know, start pulling that together. And again, if I can find money this year, this spring, to get some of this work done, I will do that. I will report back as soon as I can. And then in terms of the equipment, yeah, that'll be stuff we could work on. You know, there's a lot more to come, as you just heard. You know, Nicole and Megan and Ted are talking about, you know, they're already partnering with the schools and getting the kids involved and getting a youth advisory group and all of that to really, you know, get ownership, because you want to build the excitement for this so that when you get to the opening, it's the kids own this, right? And not in a literal sense, but in a literal sense, right? The program is theirs.
Yes, right.
They're excited about it. They've developed it. They've even named it, right? I mean, that's already started. I saw some of the first round of names that were kicking around from the schools, and some of them were really quite creative. So I think that kind of excitement you can't buy, right? And now we have the real opportunity to build to this. So that, you know, by September, fingers crossed, we're back to some relative normal, right? And you know, we go through a normal summer with rec, and then this becomes like, you know, the next big exciting thing.
Yeah, I think the fact that they've been cooped up for so long is going to give it like that just energy, you know, toward them taking ownership and making something of it. Jack has his hand up. I just have one quick question. I apologize if you already.
You want to drop this down, Nicole? Could you just drop this?
Yeah, I apologize if you mentioned this, but what is the exact target age?
I would say 5th through 8th grade is the main target. So, yeah, we would use our support staff. I would envision high school seniors on top of the assistant director. So.
Okay, great. Jack?
Actually, to your question first. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time, obviously, listening. Hard for me to do. No comments, please. And that's where the real need is. The middle school kids, and this is programmed right for them. But Chris, we're gonna. I of course will make a motion for. I think you need $50,000 to get this. If you get money earlier, will you start earlier, or what? What is the framing on that? My thought is that we could reach out to the community and raise some seed money, probably next week.
So Jack, that's actually a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. If people, you know, we have a vehicle through Safe Harbor to be able to raise. I mean, again, when I say that, people make donations to the town too. We can make it as a gift account, which is probably the easiest thing to do. And then we'll be just dedicated to this for equipment. And in terms of upgrades, you know, we have some money in the budget that we set aside for equipment and improvements. I will sit down with facilities and say, hey, do you have some money? Can we start the work on some of this? Because, you know, as you saw, none of the individual projects are that expensive. When you add them all, I'm talking about retrofitting the building, right? We want to get the windows done, we want to get the doors done. And if we get it done now, then we don't have to wait till town meeting. So I'm going to circle back with our folks here, Jack, to see if we can spend the money now. That said, I'd love you all to affirmatively vote and say, yes, find the money And if,
yeah.
yes, and then I can go back to the department to say, look, we got to find the money. So let's make this happen.
Corey?
Carrie was first, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Yeah. Question about equipment. Do we need some type of budget line item for computers, maybe video game type stuff, like technology related things? And that's also something we could maybe get people in town to donate if they have it available.
We have that sort of under the one-time expense
Okay.
equipment furniture. So, the building is wired. It's all Wi-Fi enabled. So the building's in great shape. So for that item. So, I mean, like I said, we have a lot of donated equipment already. So we're good in the hard games. So
great.
And actually,
I'm sorry. Also, when it comes to technology, the MBLC allows the library to purchase technology for checkout for patrons. So we hope to use some of that to be able to purchase some technology that the teen center can check out here and there from the library to kind of be able to keep the technology fresh and fun, and have it available at the library and then also at the teen center.
That's great.
Now I can just piggyback on that, Diane. So one of the key aspects here is that the library is doing a great homework program now, right? So it's kind of hard to put that in one space. The library is a 5-minute walk across the parking lot, right, and down the street. So kids can go play foosball, hang out, and then on the nights of the Honor Society program at the library, they can go up and do homework at the library. So there's they're close, right? And there might be a night where it's homework night at the center too. We'll have to see how it evolves. But the library's already has a great homework assistance program. The Honor Society kids work with the younger kids. It's a great program, and so there's already great programs to wrap around this to begin.
Right. Corey has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So first, just extremely impressed. I went through the PowerPoint a couple days ago when you sent it over with the collaboration for all of you on this. This is not an overnight thing. This is something you've clearly been working on for months, and just A+ job. Obviously, a big support of getting you the funding, through finding the money, but also I strongly think that this is something that the community needs to step up and say, this is important to us, and this is something that we will fund separate of us finding, saving somewhere else. So I'd encourage both, Nicole and Chris, if that gift account, and if we can, really get the word out that this is something that we're looking for residents to sponsor and donate stuff for. That way we can get this done quicker and better. I think that's the way to go. So I just want to encourage you to really drive that point home.
Yeah, and I that's exactly what I was going to follow up with. Chris and Nicole especially is to think about what the right actual sort of fundraising vehicle is, because I do think we can do a lot of fundraising. I know I had talked to Ted the other day, and we don't necessarily want donations of people's old furniture kind of thing. So we have to be very careful about what we're asking for, what we're soliciting. If somebody wants to donate a brand new TV, well, we need to either have a list of actual items that we want and or a financial, and somebody needs to be the fiscal agent, whether it's the town or Safe Harbor. And I think you guys can talk about what makes the most sense for that. It would be tax deductible for people if it went through, I think, a fiscal agent being Safe Harbor. But
yeah, that's the town accepts gifts, right? People make gifts to regularly for a variety of purposes. I don't know, I'm not a tax lawyer, so I don't know about the deductibility when you give it to the government, right? And we can accept it, it's not a problem. So we have a vehicle for it, for tax deductibility purposes. At the moment, we don't have any Friends of the Rec Center or whatever it's
right.
called.
Yeah.
And at the moment, we also unfortunately don't have a Friends of the Recreation. That said, there are vehicles that Ted already has, the Clark Chatterton Fund, for example, that already exists. People can always, and that's designed to help the youth of the community. That was a memory of a former athletic director. The funds from the Thanksgiving Day road race go into that. So there is a vehicle there that already exists. Safe Harbor exists, and you're right. Ted actually joked that this used to be the drop-off place for everybody's old couch. We don't. We really appreciate people's generosity, but we don't need couches.
Right, especially in this COVID world and the post-pandemic world. Yeah.
If people have a brand new TV, we might be able to work with that. But again, I think what would be better though is to have a list. And I think Nicole, Ted, and Megan can put their heads together and come up with a list of some cool equipment that they might need for this. And then if people want to donate physically items that are new or help support it.
They want to buy it for us and or make a.
I know that.
I think, providing you support this, and I'm getting the impression you do, it should be the community, the town's obligation to make the building fixed, right? We should put, public money to fixing the building. Equipping the building is something different, right? Getting those, the funky furniture or, the support, the supplies and that kind of stuff is a little different. And I'd rather move that expeditiously if we can.
Okay, Paul and then Jack.
One option would be put forth, options from the CEF or the PSO for grants with educational guidelines. And that would be one way to fund specific educational projects.
Thank you, Jack.
And this is really towards Nicole, or any, do we have a mechanism for matching funds? In other words, somebody puts up some money and says, I'll match it up and tell us a total amount. And could that be done through Safe Harbor, Nicole? Or
We don't have that mechanism. And do you mean in terms of someone, for example, were to donate $1,000, Safe Harbor would match $1,000?
No, Safe Harbor not. But somebody says, I'll put up $1,000. I'll match everybody's gift up to $10,000.
So I think we don't have a mechanism in place, but I think that there's always the opportunity to put it out there, and then for whoever's going to make that match, we just update them that we had such and such donation.
Jack, I'd be happy to talk to you about this as a professional fundraiser. That's something, if we find a donor.
There might be $10,000 available.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's
a
great
marketing thing. Yep.
Yeah, exactly, Jack. We could most certainly find the vehicle, whether it's through the existing rec or existing Safe Harbor. And again, I agree with all of your points. I think this is a great way for the community to kind of just buy in, right, and say, hey, we want this to happen.
Okay, so I don't want to shut off conversation if somebody has a question, but I don't want Corey to remind me how behind time I am, because I was determined to do it right this night. This is such an exciting conversation. If somebody would like to make a motion to accept this proposal and start the wheels are moving. I know who wants to make the motion. Jack, make a motion.
I'd like to move that we move forward on the proposal for the youth center.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Jack?
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
I'd also like to make a motion that we approve in principle the expenditure of $50,000 of various town funds to fund the initial startup.
Do you need that, Chris?
Yeah. I mean, Jack said in principle. He didn't say.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're by doing that,
I'm green lighting you.
Yeah, you're telling me to go back and find a way to make it happen. So
yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks. Roll call. Jack.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Carrie Thompson, aye.
Great. All right, go forth and let us know how we can help, and definitely think about a fiscal agent for any kind of fundraising, and we'll keep this train a rolling. Thank you so much for all of your hard work on this.
Thank you all.
I will, before we get to the next agenda item, I'll tell you I was on a Mass Selectmen's Association meeting, board meeting today, and everybody was complaining about how pandemic wary we all are, and how meetings were horrible, and how they weren't able to get anything accomplished, and how frustrating everything is. And it's just a joy actually to be here tonight and see all the great progress we're making as a town on all kinds of things, including something like this that I don't think a lot of people would have the wherewithal to launch in the middle of this crazy time. So thank you.
Have a good night.
Hey, yeah. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicole.
We should be able to speed round through the rest of our agenda. The next item is relating to the RFQ for legal services, which we met about a little over a week ago, as is our policy, and Michelle's here if we have any questions, but for any RFQs, they all get reviewed by town council before going out. Town council asked that the board consider taking a vote to waive a potential conflict of interest that could be perceived. We got the documentation on that. So it's just a simple, it's just to allow him and his firm to review the RFQ before it gets issued, as they may be a respondent to it. So there was a quick motion that was in the disclosure form that was sent. Paul, did you have it to read a motion?
I have it.
Okay.
Make a motion.
All right, let me just, before we ask, does anybody have any
No.
questions? Okay, great.
Make a motion to make a determination that the financial interest disclosed is not so substantial as to be deemed likely to affect the integrity of the services which the municipality may expect from town council, and further to authorize the chair to sign the form on behalf of the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Michelle. And I'll be able to sign that tomorrow, Chris.
Got a couple things for you already. The piles adding up.
Next up are the 2 employment contracts that we met about also a few weeks ago and got updated on.
So these have been discussed in executive session. Now we're discussing them in public session. So the first is a renewal of Finance Director Don Pyatt's contract. This is a 3-year extension. It actually retroactively goes back to October because we just haven't, with everything else going on, getting it in front of all of you has taken longer than I thought. Don has done a great job. It's hard to believe it's been 3 years, to be honest, but he's done a great job. He has hopefully a bright and very long future with us. You know, I think I answered questions during the executive session, but basically it's the same bones as it was before. There's some tweaks. The base raise is comparable to everybody else's every year. It's, you know, the base 2%. He has a couple of stipends based on specific licensing for him, being CPA and a mass government accountant's license, or credential, I should say, that he has. So as long as he holds those, there's a stipend that goes with it. So it's an incentive to stay licensed, though I think being a CPA enough is probably incentive. A lot of work that goes into both of those, by the way. You see, there's lots of hours and hours of continuing, which is good. It's good for us, right? The better educated our accountant is, the better off we are. So does anyone have any questions about it? Otherwise, I would ask that you ratify that contract.
No, and just sort of for the public, there are 4 contracts, 4 contracted employees in under the town point of view. Obviously, a school's different. So it's the town manager, the police chief, the fire chief, and the finance director. So these are typically the only employment contracts other than union, bigger contracts that involve a lot of people that come before the board per the Town Manager Act. So thus we're doing this one. Hopefully we won't have to do any of the others anytime soon. So is there a motion to approve the 3-year contract for the finance director, Don Pyatt?
Make a motion to approve the finance director contract for 3 years for Don Pyatt.
Second. Great. Okay. Roll call vote.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Great. Congratulations. Thanks, Don, for your hard work.
Yay, Dawn.
Thank you all for that. The second contract in front of you is a collective bargaining agreement. It's the first one. Again, we've also discussed this in executive session. So in light of the pandemic and in light of all the hard work, we find ourselves in a bit of a quandary. So contracts are all expiring. At the same time, other than, you know, the year to year we're able to navigate, we can't, it's very murky 2-3 years out. So doing a multi-year contract with committed raises is a very tough ask because we just don't know what's going to happen. By the same token, our staff has worked incredibly hard. The town's finances are stable. They're not, you know, overwhelming, but they're stable, and we're able to keep things going. And the most important resource the community has are the people who serve, the police, the firemen, the teachers, our public works workers. Police came up first, and we talked about just doing a 1-year extension contract with only 2 terms. One is a COLA, and this is 2%, and then a raise in their detail rate. So, in the police, you see them all around, guarding sites. They get paid an hourly rate. And that would go up to match what our neighbors are already paying for detail rates. We also have to stay competitive, or we won't get other officers from other towns to fill those slots. And we only have so many officers in town to fill them. I think there must have been 5 or 6 construction ones the other day. National every pipe everywhere, and this is a simple contract. It becomes the base for all of our other conversations. Now, other unions don't have to agree to 1 year. That said, I can't commit, and I don't think the board could commit to giving longer financial commitments right now. I hope it's better, but at this point, doing a 2% this year we can do. I mean, when I say this year, I mean the next fiscal year, FY22. Beyond that, it's just too fuzzy. Things change, we can always revisit it, but this was the first one. The police we had a very good conversation. We know that there's bigger issues to tackle. I won't get into those here. And we're prepared to pick up the conversation as soon in the spring or early summer as we can, as things get clearer and we can talk about some of the bigger issues. It gives us a little more time, and hopefully a cooler environment that's not COVID fueled, pandemic fueled to make those negotiations.
Okay, any questions? Is there a motion?
Jack Creighton, I'd like to move that we, approve the police contract for 1 year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Great.
I just need I need at least Diane to sign, but if as others you have a chance to come by, I think you need to sign a deed, and if you could sign a contract too, that would be great. So again, thank you all very much.
Great. Okay, town manager update.
Next,
You have
I'll
2
be-
updates.
I'll be quick. So the first one is kind of a prequel. These are both prequels for future meetings. So this year, we contracted using available COVID money with the Sandy Beach Association to manage the parking lot. They actually had, before they always had a gate attendant, but they actually took it up a notch. It was much more intensively managed, and that was for health reasons as much as anything, because we had to restrict the number of people on the beach and all of that. And it actually worked out pretty well. The beach got controlled better, the parking lot was controlled better. And the Sandy Beach Association has approached me about doing it again. And I said, well, I think it was great. I said, but I don't know that I'm going to have COVID relief money next year. That said, and also one of the other things we've talked about is, their need to clean themselves off selling out of town, other, memberships to people that live in Cohasset. So about a variety of things, and it seems like the simplest one would be to I hate to call it a surcharge, but I will for the purpose of this conversation, adding a surcharge to the existing all facility sticker, $10 or $15, and then that creates a pool of money that we can a separate account that we can then use to pay for the Sandy Beach Association, 1, to manage the parking lot, and 2, to potentially give them some funding as access for town residents to help defray some of the loss they're going to have as they back from selling out of town memberships. Again, I'm not proposing anything tonight. I'm just circling this as idea. If any of you have any questions or concerns, feel free to share them so I can come up with something more concrete. Sandy Beach folks were intrigued by something. They really want to partner. But I also need a revenue stream. And again, the budget's going to be tight next year, and I just don't have another 20 grand to pull anywhere. The management of the parking lot was very successful. So I think that was a great partnership. And I think it kept the beach safe and better run. So that's something that will be coming up at a future meeting.
So just 2 quick questions, because I think this begs like a larger pool of people discussing, and I don't know whether that needs to happen before it comes to the select board, and then obviously almost have a public hearing thing, because people are going to have a lot of opinions on this. I obviously don't want to propose something that is not going to either A, sit well with the community, or B, sit well with the Sandy Beach Association. Like, I want to make sure that we kind of walk into whatever mechanism we're going to propose with their blessing and in tandem with them. And, you know, and the other question is, when do we have to have this? Because the window's really tight. Like if like initially my first thought is, well, what if people don't want to pay that extra, you know, or, you know, is because we're basically, it's just be perceived as a rate increase on your beach sticker or on your all facilities sticker. So, you know, what if, I don't know, can we sell the same pass in a different color if you give an extra $25 or whatever it is? Like, I want to be able to flesh out some of these ideas with them. And then, but we also, the passes expire in March. So our window to make these decisions is pretty small.
So that's the reason I'm circling this with you now, to get some direction if you want to do, you know, get some more input or whatever. And we can't do multiple stickers. I mean, we have one. Again, this was created a number of years back. We went from multiple stickers to just one. And there's a logic to one. It makes life a lot easier. Some people use all aspects of it. Some only, we have people who buy them in March who use everything. And there's people who don't use the RTF for a variety of reasons, and they tend to buy their stickers in June. It's not always great for that because there's a mad scramble of people in June, and we were trying to get away from that, which is one of the reasons we moved it back to March. That said, there's going to only be one sticker this year. I mean, they've already been ordered, so we can't change that mechanism. How to add to that is what I'm starting the conversation about. You're right. There's only about a month, 6 weeks, and because the clerk has to have a rate. So when she starts selling these, she needs to know what's going to be.
Jack and then Corey.
Well, my comment was that I think I think it's a good idea to do that. But I think you would have to find out a way to differentiate, you know, just a surcharge just for Sandy Beach, not for any of the other town things, but just for the Sandy Beach. And the people who use Sandy Beach would be glad to pay that for the assurance that the parking lot would be not as crowded.
Right, well, right, and that, right, exactly, that messaging is going to be part of the challenge. Corey?
Yeah, I think that any conversation about raising an all facility sticker this year is just an absolute non-starter. Period, not going to happen, not this year, not now. I think we had an increase, you know, a couple years ago, and then the move up. It's something that I've heard complaints about all over the place for a variety of reasons that are not connected, and I just don't think this is the right mechanism for this type of thing. So at least not this year, and at least not until we get a little more creative about it. That's just one person talk.
And just to kind of combat that a little bit, I remember last summer when there was, you know, everybody was going to the beach and there were a lot of issues, and there was the issues about pulling back on people that had Sandy Beach passes from other towns. I remember hearing from a lot of people that said, I'll pay 4 times as much money to you know, basically be able to know that I have some reasonable assurances that I'm going to be there and somebody from another town is not.
You and me may hang out with different crowds. Just
right,
saying.
right. Well, you know, maybe not, but I totally agree. Chris, could we potentially could maybe you reach out, maybe Corey, would you be willing to have a call and then just kind of
Absolutely, sure. Yeah.
bounce around some ideas and then maybe bounce around a conversation with Sandy Beach and figure out what we could potentially propose to the board soon.
And by the way, this came out of a conversation with the treasurer and president of Sandy Beach Association. I didn't pull this out of the air.
So. No, I'm not. Yeah,
no, I'm just telling you that
I really want to.
Yeah, they want to have a conversation. So I'll set something up with the two of you and them and me. So sometime soon. And then we'll circle back with the board. So.
Okay. Okay, great.
The other, just a quick highlight, the current warrant, and it's obviously, and when I say warrant, this is all very draft, right? There's about 30 articles that are kicking around right now, including the one you discussed tonight about the changes to the bylaw for the Affordable Housing Trust. There's a number of zoning articles. Some are like leftover from last year, or some are being kicked around. They're not locked. They're all a lot of these are still placeholders. So over the next couple of weeks, I hope to streamline that a little bit and figure out if some of these might fit into other articles. So there's not quite as many of them. We'll see. But that's where we stand. The citizens petition deadline is not until March. It's about a month from now. So I'm working with our council, Paul Durensis, to have a kind of a Zoom night which will publicize, because we've had him come into the building, and if people want to citizens petitions, it allowed them to, you know, bounce things off, and they'll tell them if they're like not going to happen because they're not legal or help thing. So we'll probably do that in a couple of weeks. We'll post it, and we'll have like an open Zoom night. If people just want to come, or a Facebook night, you know, probably both. And people want to come in and ask questions, they can. Because again, the town council doesn't give specific legal advice, but it just helps people understand what's possible and what's not.
Right.
I don't think anyone showed up last year, but a couple of years ago, somebody did. It was the bag ban, right? The folks met up. Bag ban. So that'll happen later in the month. And then I hope at the next, on the 23rd, when we talk about the budget, to give you all a draft, kind of what the warrant looks like. You know, again, when I say that, I mean, what people are looking for, and then we'll then start carving up where these go. Obviously, the budget's already in conversation. CPC is already in conversation. Capital budget's already in conversation. Those things are already happening. But there's the water rate study. I know the Water Commission would very much like to continue that conversation. And there's, again, a number of these zoning articles. And there's a couple of other potential bylaw changes that are kicking around out there that need to be socialized. So if you look ahead at this calendar that we looked at, March is kind of like all warrant time. So there's a weekly meeting every week from the 9th to the 30th. So there's 4 weeks in a row of select board meetings, just to be prepared. If they have to move around, you know, let's plan to do that, because almost all of them have some joint component. The 23rd is the first one of that. So there'll be a presentation of the town side operating budget on the 23rd with the advisory committee in attendance. And then they start their in-depth review of the budget. And the others are tentatively scheduled, you know, the water and sewer is the 9th. So that'll be the first big joint one. And then there's a whole bunch of others that fall out. And I believe the schools are in, I want to say
later March.
The warrant all has to lock up by kind of mid-ish April, mid-late April. So everything's about a month behind what it normally would be. So any questions about any of that?
Oh,
okay.
A lot to do. Select board comments?
Jack Creighton. Youth Center. No more be said. Congratulations to the board and the town government and Chris and everybody getting this, you know, forward. I do have a dilemma. I mean, what can I talk about going forward in my, you know, my selectmen's comments? But anyway, well done.
It's all good. Corey.
Just thank you and a shout out to Cohasset DPW and all the plow drivers that are both publicly and privately employed, especially working on what was, I would consider, a New England Super Bowl as a Tom Brady fan, regardless of what the laundry says, he's still Tom Brady. And the second thing is, yeah, I know, just to be
look at her face. Look at Carrie's face. I told you.
And the second thing, my little speech last week about safety or speed limits got a little bit of attention. I guess the Mariner called my passion rosebud of some sort. But thank you to everybody who reached out, and there's actually a citizens petition going around that's encouraging us to, you know, have some action. So I'm excited that this is still kind of front and center on our priorities. Thanks, everyone.
Paul?
So today's the first day to pull papers for any of the elected positions in town. So if you're interested, look at the list, pull the papers, get the signatures. I know there are fewer signatures required due to the COVID pandemic, but lots of positions available. We need a lot of help in town. This has been a most unfortunate series of events this year, and the town has done remarkably well. So we still need lots of people to help the town. So get out there and decide to run.
Thank you. Carrie?
I second what Paul said, and also make sure to remind fellow friends and residents in town to keep registering on our vaccine page, just so we can have better data there, because I do think things are going to speed up fairly quickly. So make sure you're signed up for that.
Pre-registration.
Yeah.
Just key on that. And again, we had the update earlier, which I'm really glad we're doing as much personal outreach as possible, especially for this phase. And it's very frustrating because the doses aren't coming to the towns, and we're going to do the best we can to get as many people through our queues. But everybody should know that we're doing everything we can to advocate for as many vaccine doses to come into our town, because we know we can deliver them quicker and faster and better and friendlier, and even come and pick you up and drive you home. But people should also look elsewhere. And I'm looking forward to standing in line at Gillette Stadium someday in May when, when my number comes up. And just to, Corey mentioned the petition, because one of my frustrations is there's so much chatter on Facebook in particular about what's going on and what's happening and what we're doing. And that is not a place where government engages, just because of open meeting law and things like that. So please encourage anybody that wants to get on our agenda or wants to present any piece of information to us to reach out to any of us, and me specifically, if they want an agenda item, or they can reach out to you and you can just tell me. But I want to make sure people know that we're hearing them, we're listening, we're paying attention. We want everything to work as best as it can for as many people as it can. And they just need to get it to the right people to make sure we're able to address it. And that's usually through town hall and Tracy too, or Chris. With that, I have nothing else. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve. If there's a motion to approve the 125 and 126 minutes. Corey?
I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from 125 and 126 with also a sub comment that I like the more compact format of these minutes.
Yeah,
so.
Agreed.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Jack Creighton, as usual, as clerk, I think the technological ability to save the complete accurate records is easily done. And I think we're way behind the times. This would go very well with a compact format for the written minutes.
Great.
Abstain.
That's okay.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second? Okay, roll call. Jack?
Aye. Jack Creighton, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
Diane Kennedy, aye.
Paul Schubert, aye.
Harry Thompson, aye.
Great.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Good meeting.
Congratulations, Diane.
Got a lot
It's
done.
only 12 minutes. Pulled it back to only 12 minutes.
Yeah, Diane, good playing catch up at the end.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Brady in the final 2 minutes.
Thanks for noticing, Carrie.
I want one every meeting.
See what I